The girl asked the god about the fact that it was too hard to live 9 lives as a human being. God told the girl that everything was right, and it was a severe punishment for someone who lived near him in heaven. But now God hoped that the girl would realize the severity of her act. After a while, God began to tell the girl to tread, no matter how hard it was, to live these lives and atone for her sins. Ordinary life. A man stood with a gun and told everyone to get on their knees. The girl with her eyes closed listened to the guy and talked about how the guy's accent was Imperi and it looked like they had captured the girl. The chief Imperi asked his assistants if it was all of them. One of them started to say that it was all those who had infiltrated under the guise of listening, or maids. There was also one band leader, but as expected, they all got caught like ants in a bottle of sugar. Apparently, these people belonged to various opposition organizations. It could be such as Kuguk Youth Union and Saran Independence Committee. The girl could not believe that it was the opposition, for she was only here to steal the jewel. The chief imp began to tell people that they had been carefully hiding, but no one would get out of here alive. Suddenly, the girl started shouting to the guy to wait and not to jump to conclusions. The other woman interrupted Valentina and started yelling at them about how horrible they were, and then started asking to be untied since she couldn't die like that. Imperi looked at the woman and told her okay. He realized that the girl must have something to say if she was screaming like that. After a while, the woman's eyes were untied. The woman was yelling, cursing, and telling them not to think they could get away with it with impunity. The chief imp began to approach the woman with a slow step, and after a while, one man was no longer alive as a gunshot rang out. Valentina was shocked. She didn't realize if the woman was dead. The girl could not believe that they were going to shoot everyone. The senior lieutenant began to tell the assistant that if he was shooting, he should warn him in advance, because he was splattered with blood. The boy apologized. After a while, the lieutenant started asking the leader what they would do with the others. The leader started telling the lieutenant not to ask the obvious, and everyone would be killed. After a while, everyone began to talk about what they had realized. The head began to leave, and afterwards he asked the lieutenant about the situation with the nobles. The lieutenant talked about how there were a couple of impertinent ones at the moment. The commander began to ask about the others, and the lieutenant replied that everything had been eliminated. The lieutenant talked about how the anti-imperialists had mercilessly massacred everyone at the soiree, and they had also managed to take pictures. In the near future, these materials will be sent to all newspaper editions and radio companies. When the picture is published, the people's dislike of the opposition will increase dramatically. The commander talked about how great this was. Meanwhile, they were starting to kill everyone there. Valentina listened to the shots to the head. She didn't understand why she, a common thief, had been mistaken for a member of the anti-imperial union. It seemed to Valentina that at the end of the 9th life, the girl would be able to return to the Lord God without regret. But the girl did not understand why things had turned out this way. After a while, the gun pointed at Valentina's head. The girl couldn't believe that this was the end of her last life. 3 months ago, an abandoned house in a slum in Saran territory. There were some rather poor people sitting in the house talking about food. Some wanted remake marinated in wine, some wanted something else. One girl was lying down and didn't understand what these childish requests for dishes were. The girl began to talk about how cold, dark beer would go well with pork meat in this weather. One of the girls started asking Kim Pajin if she was tired of beer. The girl started asking the kids how they could know that. After a while, one of the children noticed the girl waking up. The child began to tell the girl Zelda about the guy waking up. The boy suggested that Lupin lie down some more, as he had lost a lot of blood, and it was too early for him to get up. Watching this, all the boy didn't understand what was going on. One of the boys started asking Lupin if he could talk, and afterwards started telling Zelda that the kid the girl had picked up had come to his senses. The boy was not thrilled with Lupin. He was telling Zelda about how the girl promised to kick him out as soon as he woke up. Zelda started telling the guy about how Lupin was still bleeding, and it was snowing outside. So a day would turn into a week and then months, an old building that was about to fall apart. The boy began to tell Zelda that they didn't have enough to eat themselves, and the girl wanted to keep him. Homeless men who looked to be in their teens. Valentina didn't realize where she and Lupin were, whether her name was hers or not. One of the kids started talking about how they couldn't throw Lupin out, because if they did, he would die of cold or hunger. One of the girls began to say that they did not care, and afterwards asked if they had forgotten their plight. The girl started telling the guy that if he continued like this, the girl would just have to kick both of them out. Zelda started yelling at everyone and telling them to stop making things so complicated. The girl talked about how she would make money, and Lupin just needed some food. After a while, Zelda closed the door and left. The boy Tony started shouting to the girl that he was going with her too. Lupin could not understand what was going on at all, and how he found himself here, and what had happened at all. Suddenly the guy started yelling at Lupin about why he was slacking off. The guy started talking about how in order to save Lupin's hide, these kids could get into trouble. The guy asked if Lupin would go after them. After a while, Lupin got up and went to look for them. There was snow outside. The boy realized what winter meant. It was as if the girl's 9th life had already begun. Being a faithful servant of the Lord, the girl had committed a great sin, which was under the strictest prohibition. It is a sin not to interfere in people's lives. But Valentina's hand reached out to bless a child on that day of judgment. Obviously, God was not happy about it. And because the mortal child was gifted with love, God told Valentina to feel the weight of the sin she had committed. So God told Valentina to live 9 lives as an ordinary person. When it was time to go back, Valentina would realize how useless her fleeting compassion for them was. Valentina had a short life as a child that ended before it began. Another life ended with being branded a witch and burned at the stake. Over and over again, pain and misfortune struck again and again, as if to show me the cost of her foolish actions. Valentina looked at the people and their behavior. People were screaming that they were scared and needed to call someone. The people asked each other if the curse of Decanira would not happen again. Greed and despair reigned everywhere in the land of men. One man began to say that the war was long over, and if the curse of Decanira returned, the cure would not be given to commoners like them. Valentina asked the Lord God about what he wanted to say, that people are creatures not worthy of salvation. The girl talked about being forced to endure all their hardships, and Valentina's last 9 lives turned out to be a street sweeper with amnesia. Now it was clear what everyone was up to. Valentina stood and thought over the words about being scum until the very end. The girl smiled and told the Lord that she would do as he wished. Valentina was overwhelmed by her previous lives, and in her last life, Valentina will try to live as long as possible. The girl was walking down the street. Her whole body was covered in snow. Valentina asked herself where the children had gone. There was a strong wind outside. It was beginning to get dark. Suddenly the girl noticed something she was shocked by. Valentina saw naked women, and in this cold. All the girls called out for Valentine to come over. Meanwhile, Valentina was thinking that it was not safe here. Suddenly, a girl hitched herself to the guy and started telling Valentine how cute he was. The girl told the guy that he was a beautiful young man with the cutest face. The girl started to ask the guy about what he wanted to relieve the tension. The girl was telling the guy that she would help relieve his tension. Meanwhile, Valentine wasn't very happy about it. Valentina started telling the girl not to do that, and it shouldn't be done. The girl was telling Valentina not to make a big deal out of it. After a while, Valentine ran away and apologized to the girl. The girl did not realize what a fussy person this was. It seemed to her that she touched something soft. Suddenly, Valentine noticed 2 children. Valentina was shocked as to why the children had come to such a place. Suddenly, Valentina opened the door and decided to enter. The girl was immediately met by a young man who began to ask Valentina if it was his first time in their establishment. The man began to ask Valentina if they had any preferences. The girl began to hesitate and tried to say something. The man calmed Valentina and told her not to be shy. The problem was that Valentina was a girl, but no one knew about it or even guessed. The man began to list different girls: blonde, brunette with brown hair or red, slender beauty or passionate woman. The man talked about how they would make all their dreams come true. Valentina looked at the man and saw multicolored petals falling on him, decorating his words. Valentina began to ask about whether or not he was dropping them himself. Valentina started to try to say something, but she couldn't. She was looking at the man who was drowning in petals. After a while, the man started laughing and smiling, and afterwards he asked about Valentina's preference for others. The guy with a smile on his face began to tell Valentina that he had those too. The guy began to offer Valentina an angel with blue eyes and blonde hair, or a muscular body with a strong smell of a man. The man began to say that all he had to do was say the word, and he would do everything. Suddenly, there was the screaming of children. A child was yelling at another child not to do it. The boy started to ask Zelda that maybe they would just get out of here. Valentina and the man began to look toward the children. Meanwhile, Zelda began to shout at the boy to let her go. The girl began to ask how long they would have to eat moldy bread. Zelda talked about how those shameless people were threatening to kick them out altogether. The boy wanted to add something, but the girl interrupted him and told Toma that she would earn so much money that they could have hot, fresh bread every day. The boy screamed and cried and said he didn't want it. Toma started asking one woman if she had forgotten what happened to Wei. The woman started thinking about Wei, and after she asked the children that she meant Wei Chen, who was whipped and thrown out. The woman started talking about how she was just being punished for her insolence towards the customer. The woman told Zelda that she had nothing to worry about, because a cute little girl like her would not be punished if she was obedient. The woman regarded the girl. She saw her disheveled hair, her face pale and thin from starvation. The woman was telling Zelda that winter in Sarin was too harsh for a child like her. After a while, the woman rose from her throne. She began to tell the girl to think hard, and then started working on Margot. Suddenly, a firm no was heard somewhere behind her. The woman didn't realize what was happening. Valentina started walking towards the woman from behind. Valentina was telling the woman that Zelda would not be working at this place. The woman started looking at Valentina with a surprised face. The children saw Lupin. They were very scared. The woman looked at Valentina and asked who she was. The woman looked at Lupin and talked about how she looked like a skinny boy with an attractive face. The woman decided that Valentina was of mixed race. The woman looked at Lupin, surprised by something. The woman began to tell Valentina that she was the type that Viscount Charles favoured. To the woman, this was astonishing. After a while, the woman began to ask Lupin if she wanted to work for Margot. The woman told Lupin that she would eat meat with fresh bread every day and sleep on a silk bed. Valentina did not hesitate to tell the woman that she was refusing. Valentina looked at the woman. The girl told her that although every day the table might be filled with abundance, the soul would wither, and gradually it would collapse, leaving behind a mere shell. So Valentina told the woman that she was rejecting her offer. The woman began to laugh and told her assistant that it was as if she had visited a church and heard the sacred bells. The woman asked Jean if that was what he thought. The helper laughed and told the woman that she was correct. After a while, the woman started asking Lupin about wanting to catch the epidemic of Decanira and be sick at the end of the new year. The woman didn't like that Valentina was talking some nonsense about the soul. The aunt began to ask the children how they could be so indecisive when offered such a great opportunity. The woman began to ask Lupin if she knew what outcome awaited the street children. The woman shouted that they would not even live through the winter. They would just starve to death or freeze to death. The woman shouted to Valentina, who would need them, let alone funerals. They would just be treated like garbage. The aunt asked Valentina about whether it wasn't better to have meals with high-ranking people instead. The woman wanted to pretend that she wanted to help the children, but she didn't. Valentina looked at the woman and then thought about something. Lupin talked about how no matter what era, everything is the same. People like the woman always say the same things. The woman talked about how everyone, as one, seduces clueless children. And then shamelessly, pretending to be powerful and generous, like a broken record. Valentina spoke of how no one could blame those who dared to do such things for survival. After a while, Lupin decided to say something else. Valentina told the woman that just to wear expensive dresses and have such a luxurious establishment, the woman was taking advantage of the desperation and hopelessness of the children. Lupin began to ask the woman if she could prove that the precious jewellery was not the blood and tears of the innocent. The woman shouted and told Valentina that it was absurd and that the girl couldn't see how expensive they were. The woman smiled and said that their children were well educated, so there was no way they could get hurt. After a while, the woman asked John if that was the case. The assistant also smiled and said that it was. Valentina asked the woman how old the children in the facility were on average. The woman replied that they were all about 16. After a while, Valentina asked the woman what the average life expectancy was. The woman immediately hesitated. She did not know what to say to that. Suddenly, Jean interrupted the woman and began to say that they mostly get venereal diseases before the age of 20, or get killed by rebellious aristocrats. The girl began to look away. She pondered a thought. A little farther away stood a woman who was screaming and asking if he was crazy. Valentina asked Lord God how the world could remain unchanged even after 9 lives. Lupin answered and talked about how, if it's all by his will, then God is really cruel. After a while, Valentina covered the children and told them to go. And also, the girl decided to add and told Madame to be more circumspect when talking to people in the future. Valentina told the woman that he had a problem with his stomach. There was a bad smell coming from his mouth, so it was problematic to have a dialogue. After a while, the children together with Valentinov were already flying into the street. Jean was smiling and telling everyone that luck had turned its back on them, and now they could do what they wanted. Suddenly, Zelda sat on the snow and started laughing. A boy started laughing after the girl, and then Valentina picked it up. The young man already knew Zelda's name, and now he wondered what the boy's name was. Thomas introduced himself, saying that they were twins abandoned on the street. Valentina was curious how the children knew her name, for she had been told that they had rescued her by picking her up on the road. As it turned out, the young man told it himself before she passed out. The name Lupin was meant for the heroine's 9th life, but she did not understand why she had no memories. The young man began to speculate that the memory was lost due to a blow during the robbery. Thomas didn't know what to do next, and then Valentina said that they had to go home. The boy didn't know what they would do to them, but he was sure that heroine would definitely be kicked out. The young boy asked not to worry, because he doubted that they were seriously planning to kick anyone out. The street children asked why Lupin had returned, to which he replied that he would get money and wished to be allowed to stay in the house for a while. The young man did not understand how the heroine could be so sure, but she simply borrowed the violin and went into town. In the streets of the settlement, Thomas began to ask why Lupin wanted the object, as he remembered that Jacques and Maurice used it to hit a ball. Zelda corrected her brother, saying that it was not a tennis racket, but a musical instrument. Lupin once saw a travelling musician playing a violin. Because the rosin had hardened, it was a little difficult for him to rub the bow, but somehow he managed to scrape it off. The girl asked with worry in her eyes if the young man really knew how to play the violin. The heroine obviously knew how to play, and since the mass had just ended, it was time for her to play. In one of Valentina's past lives, she had had the opportunity to learn to play the violin. Each time, with the beginning of a new life, she forgot the previous ones for a while. Perhaps God was thus helping her not to get confused with memories between this life and past lives. However, the musician's life was relatively clear, as it was her 8th. Valentina had to serve the nobility all her 7th life, so she knew better than anyone what kind of music people would like. The heroine was a person without memories, who was rejected even in the slums. Anyone in her shoes would have been disappointed by this situation. It was impossible to hurt the young man like that. After all, he had been through some rough lives, though he didn't know if there was any reason to be happy about it. According to Zelda, the heroine was in a country called Sarin, led by a duke. Not so long ago, Sarin was at war with the Logos Empire and was eventually defeated. According to the residents, this country had now become a desolate land, with only orphans and widows living in it. At this moment, all the passers-by were struck by the melodiousness of the music of a simple-looking passer-by. Not for the first time, those who saved Valentina from a life of despair were small and helpless children who had neither money nor a place in society. To repay the goodwill of the children, or because it was the heroine's own wish, she decided to do everything possible to make their lives a little better. The children were surprised at the amount of money they had managed to raise that day, for this time they could even taste white bread. Toma wondered where the young man had learned to play like that, for he didn't even know he had such a talent. Among the change, Zelda saw a bag of gold coins. The girl could not think who could have left them such a treasure. Suddenly, a girl came up to Lupin, who was listening with admiration to the young man's whole performance. She began to say that the heroine was an angel, for she saw wings that spread wide behind the young man's back. That day, they brought a lot of food into the house. The waif was very surprised to see a real pork leg and fresh dark beer. Lupin thought he didn't need to explain to anyone else why they weren't planning to kick him out again. This place was engulfed in fire a few years ago. It was once a hospital, then turned into an orphanage, and now it was a haven for street children living off theft, pickpocketing and begging. There was no other way for children like these to survive. Lupin entered the twins' room with a knock, where Zelda was just opening her eyes. The girl asked if the young man was really leaving already. The heroine said that a big concert was planned in the near future, and she had to prepare well. Zelda shouted loudly, telling Lupin to come home, making sure to bring a lemon pie with him. At that girl's house from the street performance, the young man decided to bring a piece of pie with him. The girl wondered if the heroine had reached her safely. Thanks to a secret passage the noblewoman had told him about, Lupin had snuck into her estate without anyone really noticing him. This girl, who had fallen in love with the heroine's performance the previous winter, invited her to join their family orchestra. Lady Josephine was the only daughter of the Earl of Grey. Lupin thought that the 15-year-old girl lacked attention because she had lost her mother as a child. The aristocrat was tormented by the imperial language course and other boring things, because she wanted so much to leave everything and just run away. It had been a week now, and Josephine didn't know why Lupin had come to her so late this time. The young man assured her that he had to work. She asked him why he couldn't just stay at her estate, because he could have brought his brother and sister with him. It would not have been difficult for Josephine to spare an extra room for heroine. The young man said that he could not afford it, as there might have been some rather strange rumours about a street musician taking a room on the Count's estate. The aristocrat did not understand what was strange about it, because her father had always been very generous to talented artists. Of course, it would not do without the girl's begging, but still it was solvable. It bothered Josephine that Lupin still considered himself an ordinary street musician. She believed that even if Young's job was temporary, he was a member of the Earl Grey's orchestra, which meant that his skills were already recognised, so he shouldn't be embarrassed. Josephine promised to do what she could to support heroine. The aristocrat took a comb and began to comb the young man's hair, noticing that he had very soft hair and beautiful skin, which made him unlike other men. Josephine thought that she would never be able to fall in love with a guy for the rest of her life, because they were always so dirty, smelly and hairy. However, Lupin was not like the others, for he was fragrant and very handsome. The girl asked for an honest answer as to whether the young man was actually an angel who had come down from heaven. The heroine said that in a way the girl was right that he had come down from heaven, but he was not an angel. Lupin said that he had actually come to Earth to be punished. Josephine was very embarrassed and asked him not to joke like that again. She really saw wings behind the young man's back last winter. The heroine began to justify that the girl must have misunderstood everything. Valentina didn't know what the child had seen then, but it was obvious that it was his mischief. God had always intervened in her human lives in one way or another, but the wings were already a cheap production. Josephine thought for a while and decided to share the secret with Lupin. The girl with all her soul wanted to marry an angel. The heroine was surprised by Josephine's ambition, who thought far beyond her years. All this was becoming very dangerous. If Earl Grey notices that his only daughter feels something for Lupin, there will not even be a wet spot from him. The blue iris, which was a huge blue diamond weighing 200 carats, was on display on television. It had been mined last year in one of the mines of the Seren state, and everyone wondered who would get such a jewel and who would end up owning it. A special participant in the program was a 3 billion rupee blue iris that won the auction, which turned out to be the court jeweller of the Logos Empire. There was talk in the country that this gorgeous diamond would soon be used to create a necklace and presented as a gift. The audience was eager to know who would get the jewel. The host announced that in a few months they were to see the necklace for themselves at the engagement of Princess Lupinia. All this meant that the diamond was owned by the commander-in-chief, who was also the regent of the Logos Empire. Viewers wondered if one had to become a princess to get a 200-carat diamond from a handsome blonde man. The presenter confirmed people's guesses. They still had nothing left but to hope for a successful rebirth in the next life. Suddenly, Lupin entered the room, and Toma immediately rushed to him, asking him why it had taken him so long to come home. The young man told him that he had been very busy, and then he asked about the boy's well-being. Tom was feeling much better, thanks to the soup his sister had made. The waif started calling Lupin to look at the blue iris that was on TV, saying that they were planning to steal it soon, and they needed the young man's help. The boy began to remember that there were several secret passages in the Earl Grey mansion. The Imperial Commander-in-Chief was to bring the diamond to the Count's mansion. A worried Lupin did not understand how the waif had managed to find out. Thomas zealously began to apologize, as he was very excited that he had accidentally blabbed. It was all too sudden for the heroine. The waifs were excited like children who tasted sweet candy for the first time. Guy didn't understand why Lupin thought his plan was crazy. Emily was the best thief in the whole neighborhood, and there was no purse for her and Guillaume that they couldn't clean out. The streetwalker said he had nothing to worry about, because he was lucky to have talent, and rich girls were attracted to him, but they were not so fortunate. Emily said that if things continued like this, they would never get out of the slums, catch an epidemic, or rot in a brothel for the rest of their lives. They could do that, or they could take their chances and go for their goal. The girl was not sure that such a chance would come again for them. Lupin decided to listen to what Henry had to say to all this. The boy wanted to open a laundromat, just like his parents did when they were alive. Street children were children who had been abandoned or lost their parents in the war, so such orphans would definitely cling to any hope. Things turned out extremely badly for Lupin, for he would not want to get involved in dubious matters. Suddenly, the twins knocked on the young man's room, and Thomas began to ask if Lupin was mad at him. The heroine assured that everything was normal, and she was the one who shouldn't have said that rumour, so it was her fault. The young man assured her to the end that it wasn't Thomas's fault, after which he remembered the lemon tart and gave it to the children. Zelda wondered if Josephine was obsessed with Lupin. The girl said that despite her noble origins, she was not known for her intelligence. The aristocrat couldn't even tell the difference between a man and a woman. After saying that, Lupin really panicked. Zelda continued to say that she had no right to judge Josephine. After all, they had originally thought that Lupin was a man. The girl asked not to worry, saying she would keep it a secret as payment for the lemon cake. With a sweet smile, Zelda suggested that next time the young man would bring her cake and cream cookies. The heroine finally realized that she had been divorced by the little girl. The heroine pretended to be a man for one simple reason. Her life experience proved that being a guy was much more profitable than being a girl. Valentina's 9th life began immediately after the defeat of the state of Sarin. Like the previous ones, the girl's current life was just as beggarly. Seemingly to the point of memory loss, when Zelda and Toma found Valentina, she decided to pretend to be a guy. Josephine glowed with happiness as she showed heroine a ribbon made of the Empire's finest silk, considering her lavender colour the most beautiful on this planet. The aristocrat thought that if she tied Lupin's hair with hers, his hair would look great. The girl tied a ribbon that went very well with the colour of the heroine's eyes. After that, Josephine persistently asked what the young man was going to do. She had given him the ribbon, so he had to give her something in return. Lupin wasn't sure he had what he could give the aristocrat. The heroine felt like she was in the marketplace haggling with merchants, offering to play Josephine her favourite tune. The girl said that the young man had something that only he could give her after all. Josephine grabbed Lupin by the shoulders, wanting him to give her his kiss. The heroine realised that all this time it had not been a trade, but harassment. The aristocrat revealed that out of all her friends, she was the only one who had never been kissed. However, that didn't mean that no one liked her, because she just wanted her first kiss to be with someone she liked. The young man wondered if he should just kiss her. Suddenly, the chair Lupin was sitting on began to tip backwards, and they began to fall together. At the last moment, the heroine managed to pick Josephine up and save her from the falling vase of flowers. Lupin began to ask the confused girl if she was all right. Josephine jumped up, saying that they had to call a doctor for the young man's arm right away. The heroine assured that there was nothing wrong and his arm was perfectly fine. It wasn't normal for an aristocrat, because these were the hands of a precious musician. Josephine asked why Lupin did this, because now the girl liked him even more. Without showing any sign, heroine was completely shocked by such a statement. The young man got up and went to the window, where he saw Josephine's guest, but he could not see his face. The girl told him that he was the Tyrant of the Logos Empire, commander-in-chief of the Island Knights, and that he had arrived yesterday and was staying in the main mansion. Lupin asked why such a noble had come to Siran, but the girl herself was not sure what was going on. Some said he was visiting because of the trouble with the rebels on the border. Others said he had come for a precious piece of jewelry for his engagement ceremony to Princess Lupinia. Josephine considered it all gossip, believing that they should not believe all the rumors. The commander-in-chief had no feelings for the princess, because it was a marriage of convenience, so he was going left and right, having many mistresses. After such a long time, the heroine learned who the commander-in-chief of the Island Knights of the Logos Empire really was. Lupin told the waifs at home that the imperial commander had arrived at the Earl of Grey's, had taken up residence in the main mansion, and planned to stay in the city for a week. The guy was happy, thinking that if this was the main mansion, it definitely had to be connected to the underground tunnel. With this information, they already had half a success and could soon be rich. The young man asked to be realistic, saying that he was still against the idea. The waif didn't understand why Lupin still resisted so much. After all, they could have gotten a 200-carat diamond. That was all they needed to finally get rid of the beggar's life. The boy was already thinking about where they were going, Iran, or maybe the Astrakhan Islands. If their plan worked, they could all live like nobles. Emily imagined there was no winter in the Astrakhan Islands, for she was very tired of the bleak cold of Saren. Henry wanted to go to Kum, for if there was plenty of sunshine, the business of his laundry would go up. Others imagined how they would be able to eat lots of soft bread with a mountain of butter, as well as lots of pig meat. The boy assured Lupin that he wasn't asking him to do the impossible, and all he had to do was find out the location of the commander's room and lead them there through an underground passage to the main body of the mansion. The heroine realized that everything was easy only in words, because she didn't even know where to find the room of the commander-in-chief. Valentina wanted to go to the mansion and look for it herself, but the entrance was probably guarded by imperial soldiers, so she had to use a secret passage. It was hard to avoid people's gazes during rehearsals, so they had to come up with a plan to sneak away. Suddenly, a nearby violinist revealed that Josephine had been waiting for Lupin for quite some time. The young man approached the girl, asking what was wrong, since he could stop by after rehearsal. The aristocrat was embarrassed, grabbed Lupin by the arm, and dragged him somewhere. Already outside, the young man asked again why Josephine had brought him there. The girl threw herself at the heroine, saying that they were obliged to spend the night in the place, in her room. Lupin's eyes showed great confusion, as Josephine told him that Lady Lawrence had gone to her son's house, and that her father was on a hunting trip with the commander-in-chief, and would be back in a few days. The girl heartily asked the young man not to go anywhere tonight. Josephine promised that no one would stop them in this house tonight. The heroine realized that if the commander-in-chief left, the mansion was completely rid of the imperial guards. At night, Valentina could not sleep a wink. The girl began to remember Josephine's dangerous words, but in fact she was just fiddling with heroine's hair. The young man thought the girl was nice, wished her pleasant dreams, and went to the underground passage. Secret passages and exit routes used in the past were woven like a spider's web in the basement of the Earl Grey's mansion, recently rebuilt on the site of a centuries-old castle. Miss Josephine had given Lupin the key to the secret passage and insisted that he come to her that way to avoid unwanted rumours. The heroine got herself into this trouble by telling her secret to the twins. In any case, Valentina's task for today was very simple. She had to check the underground path from the main mansion to the annex, then find the commander-in-chief's quarters and see if there was a safe there. The waifs had told Valentina that she would only need to scout the situation, and they would do the rest. There were many guards at the door of one of the rooms, and it was obvious that there was something inside. The heroine had heard that the Count had a grudge against the Logos Empire. She wondered what kind of relationship they had with the Imperial Commander-in-Chief. Most likely the Count couldn't refuse the Imperial Guard's request because he was an aristocrat of a defeated country. During the time of reasoning, the heroine was able to quietly sneak into the room and open the window. There were surprisingly few servants in this mansion, so Valentina thought the place didn't even smell of hospitality. But now she had to worry about her position. Across the eaves of the manor, the girl moved toward the window of the next room. Valentina was just now thinking that racing up and down the walls in the rain was not what she wanted to do in this life. Her weakness for children might have driven her to her grave one day after all. The heroine climbed into the commander-in-chief's room through the window and began to search it completely. There was a safe on the bedside table, which the girl was just about to try to open, but then she heard the voice of the commander-in-chief complaining about the bad weather ruining his hunt. In a panic, Valentina lurked behind the curtains, not understanding why the Imperials had returned. The assistant commander had said that Earl Grey had not been the source of the gossip they'd been talking about recently. It was the work of a red-headed reporter from Hot Trek. There was a time when he used to write really exciting articles for the media, but now it was said that his publications now consisted of unsubstantiated gossip, and it seems that things were starting to get complicated because he was ignoring the issue. The commander-in-chief began to change his wet clothes, hearing that the same talk about Princess Lupia's severe illness and the princess's questionable private life were false. They were no longer just yellow press articles, for they had started a rumor that the princess was not real. The aide suspected that the red-headed reporter had some kind of source. While the reporter was being followed by a faction of Imperials, they had also placed a listening device at the Hot Trek publishing house. The man promised to inform the commander as soon as they discovered anything. The commander-in-chief agreed, but asked him not to push the reporter too hard, as he might still be useful one day. Suddenly, a girl came into their room, saying that she wished to apologize to them for the disrupted hunt on behalf of Earl Grey. The aide immediately thought of the beautiful girl with silver hair and purple eyes, thinking that the Count had really taken care of her. The man asked to put down all foreplay and let her in. Sitting behind the curtain, the heroine was shocked at the turn of events in which another woman appeared. The aide decided to bow out, wishing in his heart that the commander-in-chief would let his instincts kick in and enjoy the moment. The man lit a match to light all the candles. At this point, the woman began to pull her dress down from her right shoulder. The heroine covered her eyes and her ears with her hands, not wanting to watch something like this. Valentina realized that Miss Josephine was right, and in fact the commander was a scoundrel who cheated on his fiancée with other women. The man said it was up to the girl to take off her clothes or not. He approached her, gave her a plaid, telling her to leave his room unnoticed at sunrise, and afterwards to tell the Count that he accepted his apology sincerely. The girl had to do this if she did not want to disappear without a trace. All night, Valentina tried not to sleep. Then she learned a little about the commander-in-chief, that firstly, he likes the scent of lilacs and Earl Grey tea, and secondly, he has a terrible sleep schedule because he did not close his eyes all night long. Third, either the man had potency issues, or he had a man he cared about so much that he didn't care about anyone else. At the next morning's party, Lupin could barely stay on his feet. One of the fiddlers decided to ask what was wrong. The young man said it was the first time he had ever played at such an important reception, so he was very nervous. The man thought there was cause for concern, for he himself was terrified that the manor was to be a gathering of nobles from all corners of Sarin. He had heard that even the commander-in-chief of the Logos Empire wanted to attend the reception. Rumour had it that he was an incredibly handsome man. The heroine could hardly resist telling how the commander had neglected the lovely lady and spent the whole night reading a book. The violinist also said that Duke Dominic was to be a special guest at the reception, and it looked like there was an engagement with the family. Lupin began to ask who this duke was. Though the man didn't understand how he could not be known, he did inform him that Dominic was the first successor to the Duchy of Sarin. Because of this, the Earl was going to marry Miss Josephine to Duke Dominic. Lupin was curious, for the Duke was a very elderly man. The fiddler confirmed the young man's words, saying that he was even older than Earl Grey. But it didn't matter to the nobles. Despite all this, Duke Dominic and a commander from the Logos Empire would be attending the reception. It was very rare to have such celebrations in Sarin, so Lupin had to make the most of it, not snooze. If they were spotted by any of the aristocrats, they might hire them on a permanent basis. The situation was more serious than Valentina had thought, and she had a very bad feeling about it. The children were determined and told not to worry, but something might happen to them. The girl was concerned about Josephine's marriage to the Duke. She thought she was used to everything. After all, she had lived many lives. But until now, it was hard for her to accept when a pure soul faced a cruel reality. That was why Valentina had interfered in human destiny, for which she had been punished. Right now, the heroine could not present rescue to Josephine. Even if she were to lend her a helping hand, it would not be rescue, but temporary escape. Valentina tried not to think about it, for if they succeeded in stealing the blue iris as planned, she would be able to leave the estate. Earl Grey and the Commander-in-Chief walked past the room where Lupin was practicing. The aristocrat began to talk about the young man's amazing talent, telling how his daughter had heard him playing outside last winter and had brought him to the manor. It would have been a loss for the Earl to leave Lupin on the streets, so he gave him a place in his orchestra. The Commander-in-Chief found the young man's music delightful, for the sounds of his violin were as elegant as if played by a man who had lived many years. Outside, the lieutenant reported that after the rumour had spread, other parties had revealed themselves, and information had come in that an attack was being prepared for tomorrow during the reception. All this was a tempting bait for those aiming to rebel against the commander, as well as for those in need of money. Just in case, the man needed to be ready for disguised anti-imperialists. The commander-in-chief had ordered the banquet hall to be monitored so that he could intervene at any moment. The aide was worried that there were a lot of rumours spreading around the empire because of this operation. Specifically, as if the commander was enjoying a luxurious overseas trip. Yesterday's Hot Trek headline said that the commander of the Logos Empire was trying to make amends for his dark past with a piece of jewellery. The lieutenant didn't understand how they dared to print such a headline, saying that when they were done with business, he would take care of the publishing house first. Most likely, Marquis Bastien took the opportunity to slander the commander's good name. The man did not rule out such a possibility, but in any case, if the operation succeeded, the Marquis would be dealt a blow. Suddenly, the Imperials heard Josephine being furious that Lupin was refusing to go with her. The young man said that he had received an offer of paid maintenance from another noble lady, so he could not follow the girl. Josephine persisted in trying to find out who that noble lady was, whether it was the Duchess of Chatrine, the Marquise Alfonso, or perhaps the Countess of Reims. Lupin refuted the girl's speculation. Then she began to think that the woman might have been very old. She had seen a woman at a recent tea party who couldn't even smile because her face was covered in wrinkles. It was said that the Marquise ate nothing, trying to lose weight in the waist, so she had terrible breath. In addition, it was rumoured that the Countess had so many lovers that they could not be counted on her fingers. Last time, one of her lovers broke under her weight, so she had to carry him out in her arms. Lupin asked the girl to stop, not realising where she had heard this silly gossip. Josephine said that if a young man needed content, she would provide whatever he wanted: money, position, and even love. The aristocrat put Heroine's hand to her breast, saying that she was no longer a child. Lupin pulled his hand away, believing that Josephine was definitely a child, and a small one at that. In an attempt to get out of it, Valentina began to show him what size breasts she liked. The girl could not stand it and slapped the young man, calling him a fool. Josephine ran away, whereupon the lieutenant remarked in a way that was startling. Judging by the ribbon on his hair, the man determined that Lupin was the same fiddler who used to be a street musician. The aide realised that rumours of marriage had reached the Count's daughter, and she was now begging her lover to elope with her at night. The commander-in-chief thought it all a futile effort, for they could never marry anyway. In the evening, the twins came into the kitchen, and Zelda told Lupin that everyone had gathered long ago. The young man saw the girl's worried face and asked if there was anything she wanted to tell him. Thomas wondered if Lupin was going to leave them if the plan succeeded. The boy began to remember that their mother had said she would pick them up when she had money, but she never came. Zelda promised that even if Lupin did ask for them, she still wouldn't hate him, but he had to say goodbye before he left. The girl hated waiting for those who were not going to return. Even if the young man did leave them, they could go to Madame Butterfly's. Lupin didn't understand what the twins were talking about. After all, they had saved his life, so there was no way they were going to Madame Margot's salon. The heroine promised that she would pick up the children in the morning, but while they waited, they could enjoy the sweets she had brought. Lupin suggested that they all go to a warm country together. He was going to be done with everything and back home by morning. The homeless people poured beer and drank to a 200-carat diamond, to freedom from the slums and to all wishes. The heroine hoped that these humble childhood dreams could come true. It was time for the reception, at which Lupin played in the orchestra. In the middle of the dance, His Grace Dominic arrived with the girl. Everyone was puzzled by this, for the girl was the Duke's mistress, so it was unclear why he had brought her to this place. The Count did not oppose this behaviour, as his daughter could become a duchess. Then, the commander-in-chief from the Logos Empire arrived. In a world spread out under the light of the chandelier, the orchestra was ready for the celebration, and the hall with people in luxurious clothes was soaked with the aroma of sweet wine, a space full of their stories that no one even knew about. The sight before Heroine's eyes was truly blinding her. Until this morning, she had been living with her children in an abandoned house, so what was happening at the reception seemed unreal. Suddenly, the lieutenant noticed Lupin among the crowd of musicians. The violinist began to ask Lupin why Miss Josephine was keeping her eyes on the young man and what had happened between them. The heroine revealed that she had said goodbye to her. The man did not understand why Lupin was so unbowed and not even willing to take the opportunity before the aristocrat's wedding. Valentina thought the time had come, so she had to slip away unnoticed. Suddenly, a maid came up to Josephine and said something, and then she quickly went somewhere else, right in the middle of the celebration. Looking around the hall, Heroine did not notice the Count and all the military of the Empire. All of this was strange, as Duke Dominic was a special guest. The violinist worriedly began to ask why Lupin had stopped playing. Suddenly, loud noises came from the side of the annex. The Duke immediately wanted to evacuate, but the door to the outside was locked. At that moment, a lot of tear gas was thrown into the banquet hall, causing most of the aristocrats to fall to the floor. The heroine didn't understand where the tear gas was coming from at the dinner party, or what was even going on. Valentina began to tell everyone to run through the emergency exit, but everyone had long since passed out. Suddenly, Imperial military and gas masks came in. Luckily, the girl managed to hide behind the stairs. The lieutenant reported that the goal D had been achieved, and now it was time to go through the commander-in-chief. The man pulled out a pistol and shot the Duke in the head, which made the heroine horrified at the realization that everything was a setup. The dinner party turned out to be a trap for the Empire. The Imperials decided not to linger and go as far away as possible. Valentina did not fully understand what had just happened, and why the military had even killed Duke Dominique. She wondered why she was the only one not affected by the gas, but now it was more important to find out what happened to the children. The heroine burst into tears, shouting to find them immediately. Earl Grey had been watching the situation all this time and was obviously up to something. When Valentina came outside, she saw that the whole manor was on fire. She assured the gentleman that none of this should have happened. If the street children were lucky, they could end up in a warm country far away, eating meat and white bread, for they were just children who were striving for their dreams. Near the entrance to one of the rooms lay Assad, who was about to give up his breath. In the burning room lay Henri and Emily. The heroine wanted to find Jacques and Guillaume, but suddenly he was hit on the head with a buttstock. After a while, Valentina woke up to the screams of a woman who claimed that it was all a setup. According to her, the Imperials had set the whole thing up to catch them, They should have known better, since they'd left the diamond almost unguarded. The military ordered everyone to keep quiet. They didn't understand how anti-imperialists even dared to babble about such things. The Imperials decided to blindfold everyone, which threw Heroine into further confusion. It looked as if the military was sentencing them to death. Suddenly, there was the sound of footsteps, and the commander-in-chief entered the room. The man was told that they had caught everyone who had entered disguised as servants or maids, and there was a musician with them. As the Imperials had expected, everyone was caught like ants in a bottle of sugar. Valentina immediately noticed the familiar voice of the commander-in-chief of the island soldiers of the Logos Empire. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and the woman fell to the floor, gasping for breath. The lieutenant asked the fighter to warn him in advance if he was going to shoot, because he was splattered with blood. The heroine was horrified to realize that they were indeed about to be killed. The counselor began to ask what to do with the others, but the commander asked not to ask stupid questions and just kill them all. As he left the barn, the lieutenant remembered the musician, the fellow who had been slapped on the cheek by the count's daughter. According to the report, he had been captured near the vault where the bombs were kept. All the people found in the room were children, and it was hard to call them anti-imperialists. Consequently, the commander-in-chief wondered what Lieutenant Schultz was trying to say. The man said he didn't mean anything by it. He was just curious as to whether the children might be thieves who had gone into this because of bad luck in life. The lieutenant assured her that he had no wish to offend the commander-in-chief. It was very strange to the man that his aides sympathized with anyone, and whether it was to his liking. The commander said that the musician had seen him kill Duke Dominic, and that was reason enough to get rid of him. After the commander had killed the Duke, and had already started to wipe his gun, he saw Heroine, but decided to put it off for later. The lieutenant was very surprised that the musician was not affected by the tear gas. The man began to ask why the commander-in-chief had not dealt with Valentina immediately. Suddenly, a fighter came running to them, informing them that a bombardment of the Northern Confederacy had begun, and that there had been a surprise attack on the border. The heroine was beginning to think that this was the end of her 9th life, but suddenly the Count entered the room, ordering to end it there. The aristocrat promised that he would take care of the rest, and he had already discussed it with the commander. The military man began to assure him that they had received no orders. The Count insisted, saying that the Imperials had more important things to do. A siren sounded, and everyone began to group into squads. The Earl asked if it was really Lupin, who had been picked up off the street by his daughter. The man suspected that the young man wanted to seduce the innocent noble lady with his mediocre play. He realized that Lupin was one of the scum scattered throughout the country. However, he thought that Josephine had finally found a toy that appealed to her. That was why the Earl had left him behind. Despite all this, he had no idea that his daughter's toy was planning to rob the commander-in-chief's safe. It amused the man that the commander-in-chief had prepared such a tempting bait, but had only caught a couple of unfortunate thieves. Valentina realized that the diamond really had been just a decoy from the beginning. The Earl went on to say that when the soldiers had fired the tear gas during the dinner party, he had seen that only Lupin had been unaffected. The man did not understand how it was possible and who the young man really was. Lightning rang out, and the heroine found herself in the dungeon where Jacques and Guillaume had been sitting for a long time. The boy began to blame Lupin, thinking he was the one who had ratted them out. He wanted to know how much the Imperials had paid the young man. If Lupin had nothing to do with it, then the waifs couldn't have known about them coming. If the young boy hadn't told the children about the underground passage, they wouldn't have even thought to plan the theft. The boy blamed everything on Heroine. Guillaume asked Jacques to stop, for they knew nothing for certain, for Lupin had been captured with them. The boy said that they were guarding the entrance to the underground passage. They were going to escape together as soon as the boys had cleaned out the safe. Then they heard a loud sound, the ground shook, and the children were frightened and ran outside, but there were soldiers everywhere, as if they were waiting for them. Guillaume began to ask if Lupin knew what had happened to those who had gone up to the 2nd floor. The heroine turned dark, which made everyone immediately realize what had happened then. The others in the cell did not understand what the homeless people were talking about. They were simply told that they could get money at the reception. Suddenly, a gas with a strange odor began to flow into the ventilation system. Valentina immediately realized it was tear gas, so she ordered no one to inhale it. Jacques, calling Lupin a smartass, didn't understand how they could even breathe then. Eventually everyone passed out, leaving Heroine all alone. The chamber was filled with the same gas used by the soldiers of the Empire. Everything was being watched from above by the Count, along with the scientist, who was thrilled that the heroine had no reaction to the gas. After everyone woke up, Guillaume began to speculate what it was and if it was poisonous gas. On the other hand, this guess was not true, as there was no reason for the Count to poison them, and they woke up. One of the prisoners began to panic, saying that they were all going to be killed and that they were all going to die. Jacques ordered him to shut up and stop his nonsense. Valentina was sure that it was the same gas that the soldiers had sprayed at the celebration, and it had no effect on her. The girl could not understand the reason why only she did not lose consciousness. After a while, the gas came from the vent again. Jacques started waving his arms and swearing, but suddenly blood came out of his mouth. All the other prisoners began to die one by one. The heroine realized that this gas was different from before. Valentina bled and began to ask loudly why such things were being done to them. At this time, at the Logos Empire Palace, the commander-in-chief was questioning the current situation. The lieutenant reported that the coal mine area northeast of North City had been bombed, but luckily it was midnight and there were no casualties. The commander-in-chief ordered an immediate strategic meeting, gathering all the employees in the control center. The man decided to see if there was any news from the temple. The aide reported that there was nothing new so far. The attack happened suddenly in the middle of the night, so there were communication problems in the North City area. The lieutenant asked if the commander thought they had figured out their plan. The man thought it was too early to tell, and they needed to establish communications with North City first to get accurate reports on the current situation. The commander-in-chief was going to go to North City at the end of the strategy meeting, for he would have to see all the repercussions personally. The lieutenant asked what to do with the princess, since they should have at least reported the situation to her. In the evening, a girl in a red cloak came into the tavern to buy a love potion from the bartender. The man didn't understand why a girl like her would need something like that, for anyone would have to fall before such a beauty without any potion. The blonde asked to stop talking about nonsense and give her the potion as soon as possible. The girl got what she wanted and headed for the exit while one of the men wondered about her. The man headed after her, calling the blonde girl Tina. The girl said Hans was mistaken, but he didn't believe her and pulled off her cape. The man made sure he couldn't help but recognize the beautiful girl with blonde hair who looked exactly like her mother. He couldn't stop saying that he had even married her mother. The man asked how the girl's mother was feeling, because judging by her beautiful appearance, she had a decent life. But the man was not doing so well. They had not seen each other for so long, so the man wanted to get some money from her. The girl started beating on him, telling him to let her go. Hans was furious that the girl had ignored his words, for he had raised her from an early age, and now he wanted her gratitude. A red-haired girl walked past them and asked if the blonde was all right. The man ordered to mind his own business and go where he was going, for the girl was his runaway daughter. The passerby called the uncle strange, for if the girl was his daughter, he would not meddle with her in such a way. The girl offered to walk the blonde to the police station, but she pulled up her hood and ran off into an alley. The man grumbled, for he had just missed his ticket to the good life. Suddenly, a young man ran up to the passerby and told her that she had seen a girl who looked exactly like Princess Lupinia. The blonde's eyes were very similar, but it was unclear why the princess would be wandering around in a city like this. The young man asked how much the aristocrat had drunk today, saying that on that note they would end today's drinking. The girl assured him that everything was fine, and the young man should not do that to her. A passerby's assistant told her that there had been an attack by the Northern Alliance, after which the girl became very worried. At night, the princess returned to the palace, where Commander-in-Chief Naiz was already waiting for her. The princess began to ask when the man had returned, for she had heard that he was to spend some time in Sarin. Nisei said that the Northern Alliance had invaded the border, so he had hurried back. The maid was at a loss when the man came to check on the girl. The blonde wondered what had happened. Nise told her that the princess had been taking a leisurely stroll in the middle of the night when the war started. The man asked where it was that Tina was secretly walking alone, and whether she realized how serious the consequences of her actions could be. Nisa questioned if the girl thought what would happen if it was revealed that she was just a double of the princess. Even though Tina came from the slums and had nothing to lose, her life was too valuable, so from now on she was forbidden to leave the palace without a man's permission. As soon as the real princess showed up, Tina would be given a not modest reward, so she should not forget about the deal and be as careful as possible. The girl understood Nisa's concern. It was just that she hadn't seen her for a very long time, and she was very lonely at heart. The commander-in-chief promised to talk about it after his visit to the northern region. They had to keep an eye on the situation, but still, the possibility of a large-scale war was not high. After all, the enemy was also assessing their capabilities, so they could exhale for now. The man suggested that if Tina couldn't stand being alone, he could send someone to her who could chat with her quite a bit. If the princess needed anything, she should let Naze know and never go out without his permission. The commander-in-chief left, and the girl started hitting the dishes, saying that she didn't need unknown listeners. She thought that no one would be satisfied with being the princess's replacement. Tina promised herself that there was no way she would lose to a princess who hadn't even shown up in years. The girl decided to forget the sadness and achieve everything, both Commander-in-Chief Nisa and this empire. In the Northern Empire, there was a meeting of the military at the Temple of Marimont, where it was reported that fortunately they had no injuries. The lieutenant was worried that word had gotten out about this local temple. The word was that the attack had come from an abandoned mine not far from them. Nisa had said they should have sent an ambassador if they had a grievance against the empire, and invading the border was a serious step. However, since they had decided to provoke, the empire needed to show the difference in strength, and after that, they needed to negotiate diplomatically. After his speech, the man decided to look around and ordered no one to follow him. No matter what Nisei did, he still couldn't deal with the sadness that tormented him. He believed it wasn't his fault, but he still could never get over it. Looking at the lake, the man thought about it and saw a girl talking about the secret of the empire. The commander-in-chief was shocked by the hallucination in which he had often seen Lupinia. Suddenly, the heroine woke up and saw the count beside her. The man reported that she still managed to survive. O to the last was sure that the girl would also die from an overdose. Valentina jumped up from the bed, asking Gray why on earth he was using them as lab rats. The man forcibly placed heroine on the bed, questioning her if Gray was surprised that she had betrayed him. Even if she enjoyed deceiving the count, she was still just a street girl. The heroine realized that she had been exposed. Her hair and eye color were not the same as pure-blooded Sarans, so she must have mixed blood with someone from the lower levels of the empire. The count was already very fed up with the likes of Valentina, orphans of the past war who littered the streets of the country indiscriminately. The man believed that the heroine's existence was an embarrassment to Saran, just a living reminder of their defeat. The count said that if he ruled the country, he would immediately get rid of anyone who wasn't from Saran. Gray's gaze was very familiar to the girl, treating people as if they were things. The man was more like a selfish god, recognizing only what he himself considered right. The heroine wondered if that was the reason why the man had put a lot of innocent people to death. The count was a little surprised, for to him these were not people, but merely rats eating their country. The same was true of the girl. Since Valentina had decided to make a happy living by stealing from his family, dared to disgrace them by trading them for jewelry, she deserved to be punished. The man believed that the heroine had dazzled them with her sincere violin playing, fair skin, and mysterious violet eyes. Bursting out, Valentina did not understand why then the count had kept her alive. The fact was that Gray had not yet decided whether he should get rid of the girl. The heroine thought the man was crazy. Throughout her life, she was afraid that someone like him would kill her. The count said that the girl had a lot ahead of her, and since that was the case, she would have something to do from now on. The man said that scum like the girl didn't even know about the Dejanira's curse, which spread across the continent every decade as the worst epidemic, and some also called it the curse of the gods. Once infected with this disease, the outcome was the same for everyone, regardless of age or gender. Death after excruciating pain. So in the empire, this disease was called God's wrath. The vaccine for Deuteranera was secretly produced only in the Logos Empire. Because of this, other countries had no choice but to become dependent on the empire. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the current empire only existed because of this cursed vaccine. Valentina's role was to figure out how to make this vaccine. The girl didn't understand why her, but the man explained that her petite build seemed very appropriate for espionage. Gray threw an envelope on the bed that contained recent photos of Zelda, proving that she was alive. The Count said that while Valentina was lying on her bed, the boys were starving, waiting for her in their shelter. The boy decided that the people the man had sent were the Imperial Army. He rushed to escape and died in an accident. The girl, on the other hand, was in the care of the Count's country house. The man said that if the heroine performed this task well, he would provide her with a rich life in a beautiful house, and if she refused, Zelda would be thrown out into the street and eventually die a horrible death. The Count asked Valentina to think carefully before giving an answer, because the poor child's fate depended on her. Now she had to go to the Empire and get information about the vaccine. The girl realized that she really had no choice. In the end, the heroine accepted the Count's offer, though she didn't know if it could be called an offer. Valentina couldn't save Tom and the other children, but there was no way she could lose Zelda. She promised to return to the children, but she couldn't. The situation had become so messy that Valentina was unable to save the children she was supposed to protect in the first place. Even in her 9th life, she remained completely powerless, so she hated herself. Suddenly a man approached her, saying that he too hated being locked up in a place like this and doing spy training. Today's training was going to be tough, because it started with a 20-kilometer run. The heroine didn't say anything, so the man thought he had fallen into a stupor from his beauty. The man introduced himself as Felix, telling Lupin to take care of him, for they were partners in the cause of the Empire from now on. At the training session, they jogged and then went to practice shooting. Lupin's skills had the young man in complete awe, wondering if he was serious about being partnered with him. The heroine said if Felix kept sticking to her, he would be the next target. In the fight training, Stefan won with ease and then wished the young man good luck. He thought that Lupin could not cope because of the different weight category, but he easily put him down from the first reception. The opponent did not want to give up and already wanted to stab heroine in the back, but suddenly Felix knocked over a chair on him. The fight started, and the young man's eyes lit up, while Valentina just stood there silently. Already in the room, when Lupin was treating his comrade's wounds, he questioned why he was fighting so much and meddling in the affairs of strangers. The words hurt Felix, for he had stood up for his partner. Lupin asked not to do that again, because he could deal with everything himself. The heroine advised the young man to rest, and herself went into the shower. The scout realized that Lupin does not make friends so easily. In a way, it became a real challenge for him. The young man had the best plan for what would start a strong friendship. He decided that a frank, naked conversation was the best thing he could do, whereupon Felix stripped off his clothes and walked over to Lupin's house. There were a lot of free showers in the room, so the young man didn't understand why Lupin was huddled in the corner, quietly washing himself. When he saw Valentina naked, the young man started yelling that she was a pervert. He began to say that she should have said she was a girl right away. The heroine thought that the young man already knew it, but he could not think about it. Felix fell into a stupor, remembering what weights Valentina lifted. The girl said that there was no such prohibition in the rules, and then went into the room. Felix was shocked, because until now he did not know this, and slept with the heroine in the same room. After a while, the Count entered the room, asking if the girl was ready to go to the Empire. She would have to infiltrate the Imperial Palace and pretend to be a servant. It was where all the power of the Empire was centered. Isle Nice, the Empire's commander-in-chief, was in control now, so Valentina needed to get close to him. The closer she got to him, the easier it would be for her to get information about the vaccine. The heroine thought that the Count wished her to seduce him, but in that case, it was better to send not her, but a pretty girl. Gray had tried a similar method before, and if his attempts had been successful, he would not have used the present plan. Nisei might have had the same taste as Josephine. The man noticed that Valentina had befriended Felix, so he advised her not to trust him too much, for the boy had more than a few skeletons in his closet. The girl had to give information to the Duke personally, not through Felix. At all costs, Valentina had to get the information about the vaccine. The Count had said that if the girl wished Zelda to be safe, she would do exactly as he said. Once again there was a look of utter contempt, as if they were not people, but mere things in Gray's hands. Valentina realized that the fact that she was now following the Count's orders did not mean that she belonged to him. The man did not understand why she resisted, for whatever her will was, she was still under his control. Gray asked the girl not to be so reckless, as she should be well aware of the cost of her defiance. Felix stepped out of the shower, asking if he had interrupted their conversation. After a while the man left, and the would-be scouts went to bed. Felix began to ask what kind of relationship Lupin had with Earl Grey. He would have liked to torture her with such questions, but he did not know if it would be right to do so. The young man told her that he had an older daughter, and that with heroin, it was difficult to communicate with her. Seeing the girl's grim face, Felix immediately began to apologize, saying that he had most likely misspoken. The young man realized that the Earl knew Lupin's weak spot, and that she was working as a spy against her will. The girl asked in return what Felix's weakness was, what had brought him to the Empire. Valentina still remembered the Count's words that the young man was not to be trusted much, for he had not a few skeletons in his closet. The young man had a deal with the Count. Arriving in the Empire, he had some business to settle, so he did not regret his choice to come to this place. Felix had a choice, however the girl did not have that luxury. She had no idea why she was chosen, and if she would be able to accomplish the mission. The heroine was completely confused, but she was definitely sure that she had to protect Zelda. The girl decided that for the time being, she would only think about it, which means she would go to the Empire, find out everything about the vaccine, and report to the Count. The action moves forward 3 months to the capital of Odin's Empire. The cook thanked Lupin. Truffles were definitely needed for tonight's menu. The kitchen was quiet now, as the princess had taken all her time to prepare. The heroine asked what important guest was to appear soon. According to the man, the commander-in-chief of the army would be arriving soon, after 3 months away, so preparations could not be neglected. No matter how busy he was, anyone would have found time to visit his bride for 3 months. And besides, she wasn't some local girl after all, but a princess of this country. On the way, the head servant met Lupin, very excited to call him along. On this day, the man in charge of the waiter position ate something that gave him a stomachache. There were no free people available, so they were forced to go in pairs. All that was required of them was to seat everyone in their seats. The head servant asked Lupin not to shake hands with the dignitaries and to behave calmly. In the study, the man shouted that the situation couldn't be called calm, for they thought they were smarter since they were looking down on them. The speaker suggested that this time they should cross the mountain range and get rid of the pesky barbarians. The other noblemen did not support this idea, because then a total war could start, and it would be a heavy blow to them. The heroine brought the food over, not stopping to look at Nice's calm face. It had been 3 months since Valentina had infiltrated the imperial palace without achieving any results, and now she faced the commander-in-chief so unexpectedly. The girl began to think about what she would do if Nice recognized her. The heroine assured that everything would be fine, because then her eyes were closed and the man did not even pay attention to her. The girl started to pour coffee for the commander-in-chief, but he stopped her with his hand. Nisa said he wanted tea, not coffee. Valentina agreed with him, thinking her heart was about to jump out. The room said that this was the second war in 4 years, so people were very anxious. It all started because of the anger of the imperial family and unfulfilled obligations. The Dejanira curse was predicted to come sooner than they expected. One of the aristocrats didn't understand why everyone was overreacting, since the empire had plenty of vaccines and it was only a problem for other countries. Marquis Bastien asked everyone to calm down, for they had to take care of the common people now anyway. Nacy asked if the Marquis really wanted peace. The man confirmed his words, saying that there was nothing good in bloodshed. However, it seemed that simply wishing for peace was not enough to appease the public. What was needed now was some kind of event to distract the residents, such as the wedding of members of the imperial family. The aristocrats were concerned, since the crown princess was still too young. Another assured that she was old enough, so they needed to get the princess married before the end of this year. The main topic of negotiation shifted from the war to the princess's wedding. There was still the question of whether these people knew that the commander-in-chief was in big trouble. Nacy kept looking at Heroine, which made her uncomfortable. The aristocracy seemed to be in a hurry to give the commander-in-chief the regency. If a formal marriage was going to be an issue, they needed to respect Her Highness's will. The man didn't realize this, accusing the other of simply wanting to shove his son through. He assured that he was up to nothing, but was merely being courteous to the princess. The press said that the commander-in-chief had a mistress. So far, there was no scandal, even though he had brought her. Everyone did not understand how the princess did not turn out to be a burden to Naïs. Seeing that a fuss was being made, the Marquis asked everyone to calm down and listen to him. A man decided to introduce to the aristocracy his son who had returned after studying abroad, who turned out to be Felix Bastien. In the evening, the heroine came to his house as the young man was reading an amusing weekly magazine. Felix thought the girl was busy getting used to the place while the interview was going on. Valentina asked how the young man had heard of the place. The waiter told him that Lupin had gone to get truffles. These mushrooms were hard to find, so the young man thought she had received a blessing from God. The girl said that if Felix continued to talk such nonsense, she would kick him out of the door. The young man assured her that he did not know where Lupin worked. She was going to tell her about it, but still could not warn her beforehand. Valentina said that Felix shouldn't apologize, since he was only pretending to be her partner to get closer. She knew he was obviously hiding something, but she hadn't expected his secret to be so surprising, for he was really the son of the Marquis of Bastien. As a result, it appeared that the Marquis Bastien and the Earl of Grey had decided to act together, and the young man was helping them to do so. Felix agreed with the heroine, for they seemed to desire the same thing, a vaccine recipe. They were both trying to get the throne of the Empire and the Kingdom of Saran. To do this, they needed to get a vaccine, which is monopolized by the Empire. The girl assumed that the Marquis was going to prevent the marriage of the princess and the commander-in-chief and put Felix in his place. The young man confirmed the speculation, saying that when he married the princess, he would immediately put heroine in a good position. As Felix drank the tea, he began to spit it out, as it had a terrible taste. The young man said that no matter how angry Lupin was at him, poisoning him was too much. Suddenly, a girl came into the room, saying that she had come up with a new painting concept. The past theme wasn't good, so she needed a change of style. The heroine told Mrs. Kiki that she wasn't interested in it anymore, because last time she was just asked to do it. The girl asked not to say that, because the idea might promote Valentina. Kiki wanted to write about a young man working at the Imperial Palace. Felix spoke to the reporter, who wrote the article about his Lupin, but the girl did not recognize him. She thought that the heroine had signed a contract with another manager, and she had just been tricked. The reporter asked Lupin to go somewhere quiet and talk it over. Felix said that the girl must have misunderstood everything, and he wasn't really a suspicious type, but the Marquise's son. The reporter was shocked to meet the hidden son of Marquis Bastien, who appeared during the commotion at the Senate of Elders. The discovery of truffles in the imperial forest was a true accident. Arriving at the palace, heroine immediately began to explore the area. In the forest, the girl just felt where these mushrooms grew, and at first everything was fine, because it helped her a lot in her work, because under the pretext of searching for mushrooms, you could explore the territory as much as you wanted. The girl felt that she still shouldn't have given Kiki an interview, after which quite embarrassing articles appeared in Hot Trek. This magazine specialized in scandals of the ruling family and nobility, and they wrote provocative articles only for personal gain. The Palace of Lohos, which was once the only shrine in the imperial palace. Later, when the empress was imprisoned, a new shrine was built, and this one lost its former glory. People were no longer allowed to go there, so now the place was abandoned. Only bushes and thorns remained in Lokos's palace, but people secretly kept coming there at midnight, and they were soldiers. The girl thought that there might have been something hidden here. The vaccines were under the direct control of the commander-in-chief. Suddenly, due to the strong wind, a tree branch scratched Valentina's face. It began to rain, and the girl decided to turn a random corner, where there was a gazebo in which you could take shelter from the rain. It was the heroine's first time in this place. Because of the rain, she couldn't immediately see the person who was in the gazebo, but after a while she realized that Nise was standing in front of her. The girl fell into a daze, not knowing what to do. The man began to say that the girl had kept her promise after all and had returned to him. The commander-in-chief approached the heroine and began to wipe the blood from the cut on her cheek, saying that he wanted to protect her by calling her a princess. Suddenly, Valentina had a strange feeling that made her not even dare to push away and let herself be kissed. Nise apologized and passed out, leaving the girl completely unaware of what had just happened. After a while, the heroine brought the commander-in-chief to her, remembering how much the strength training had actually helped her. Valentina wanted to call someone. After all, she didn't want to leave her man out in the rain. But she couldn't do that, because if the Imperials wanted to know what she was doing outside Lokos's abandoned palace, she would be in trouble. Now before her lay the same Nice who had killed Duke Dominic and who had ordered her to deal with the heroine. Valentina had never seen Nice since her arrival at the palace, but today she had managed to cross paths with him twice. In the dream, the man asked the princess to give him her hand. The commander-in-chief had a high fever, and the girl wanted to know what this cold-blooded man had done wrong, if even in the dream he was so persistently asking for forgiveness. The heroine reassured herself that the man had a high fever, which was why he mistook her for Princess Lupinia. In the morning, Nice was surprised that he had managed to get his first sleep, the first time since he had started suffering from insomnia. However, he didn't realize where he was. Suddenly, Lupin entered the room, saying that he didn't want to disturb the man while he slept, so he had moved him here. The young man was about to call for someone, but as the commander-in-chief was feeling better, he changed his mind. The heroine saw that Nisa was tasting the tea and wanted to put some more, but the man said he wouldn't drink it again. The commander-in-chief stood for a moment, saying that Lupin looked quite familiar, and perhaps they had met before. Trying to get out of it, the heroine remembered an article about her from Hot Trek and gave it to the man to read. Nisa read the article and then asked why he was in a place like this. The man asked for a detailed description of the situation so he could understand everything. Lupin realized that Nice didn't remember anything, so he told how he went into the forest and found the man unconscious. It was raining, so he carried the commander-in-chief to his place. Nisa asked why the young man hadn't called anyone, and he replied that he was just afraid he might be mistaken for a kidnapper. The heroine said that others should not know what had happened. She was angry with the man, because he was very heavy to carry, and he slept in her bed for 2 days. Nice still hadn't removed his hand from his head, so the heroine thought it still hurt. The man finally remembered seeing Lupin in the assembly hall. The commander-in-chief promised that this time he would leave it at that. The young man asked to wait while he brought him a nice cup of tea. The man asked him to remember that if Lupin ever again poured him the tea he had recently been drinking, he would be arrested not for kidnapping, but for attempted kidnapping. Nise didn't wait and quietly left, leaving the heroine wondering what was wrong with her tea. As soon as the commander-in-chief entered the office, the lieutenant immediately bombarded him with questions about where he had been all this time. High Priest Luna told Julian that nothing terrible had happened, just as he had said. The man said that he was well rested and felt much better. Luna immediately realized that Nisa had a lover and was eager to find out who she was. The man told him about Lupin Mueller, the servant in the Imperial Palace who poured tea during the Senate meeting, ordering the lieutenant to find out about the young man. Julian asked why Nisa wanted information about the servant, but he kept saying that he had replaced all the maids in the princess's palace because Lady Tina had slipped him a hallucinogen. She did it the day they met at the Imperial Palace. Then they sat at dinner, where the girl advised Naze to watch his diet. The man took the advice, promising to do something about it. But Tina didn't stop offering him a dish from the specialty chef. The commander-in-chief thought that the cook was a connoisseur of truffles, since his dishes were constantly on the table lately. Tina thought it was because of the servant who had been with them for a while. He had been able to find truffles on his own, without the help of a pig. And then there had been articles about him as a messenger of heaven. The girl said that the smell of the mushrooms was unbearable to her, but for some reason the people of the palace liked them. Nisa said she didn't have to do anything against her will, and next time ask for food that she liked. Suddenly the man's eyes went dark, whereupon Tina carried him to the bed. Here she began to remember how she used to buy a love potion that could sweep anyone off their feet. The face Tina had seen for half a year looked beautiful, even under the influence of the drug. That day was the first time the girl heard tender words from Naze, so she started to apologize to him, but she still thought it was the man's fault. In her dream, the commander-in-chief kept calling for the princess. Then Tina started screaming for the man to forget about her, because this girl would not be able to return to him again, because she was going to take everything. From the first day of the girl's arrival in the palace, she never backed down so that she could get her way someday. The man pounced on Tina, but when he realized it wasn't the princess, he just got up and walked towards the exit. Nisa's body became very heavy, and he took off most of his clothes and then went somewhere. What happened next he had no way of remembering. The lieutenant reminded them that he had already warned the commander that he needed personal security, since he had a lot of ill wishes. Luna asked what they were going to do about Miss Tina, since they weren't sure if she'd slipped something to Nisei. Julian agreed, for he didn't think the girl was stupid enough to make an attempt on the commander-in-chief's life when her position depended on it. The man had a headache, but it was not a side effect of the drug, and he felt strange. Naze began to ask Luna if he had some sort of herbal tea that could relieve headaches that had a very bitter taste. The high priest remembered that there were herbs that helped relieve headaches, but the more severe kinds were not so easy to get rid of. Luna began to question where Nice had been all these 2 days, as he had been trying to find out his location all this time, while leaving the Marquis of Bastion in the dark. The commander-in-chief said he was just sleeping. The high priest thought the man was really bad with insomnia. Nisa needed to see if the tea was helping her headaches, and he could also check on the servant. In the courtyard, the head servant told Lupin that he had received an offer from the top to become a professional truffle hunter. The pay was much higher, so the man thought the young man would do a much better job there. The heroine reminded the head servant that she didn't want that. Lupin wished to serve the commander-in-chief, but he had never had a personal servant of his own. The young man still had the opportunity to apply for a full-time position, so he was going to prepare for the next recruitment in the second half of the year. The heroine appreciated the superior's offer, but still decided to refuse. The head servant gave Lupin the goodies that were left after the event, and then the young man left. The man thought that the servant was too naive, because hiring employees to the imperial palace would only happen if there was a cancer on the mountain. The heroine needed a job near the commander-in-chief to get more information. Valentina realized that it would be difficult for her to get an interview without money and connections. She could ask Felix, with whom she would be accepted unconditionally, if recommended by the Bastion family. After a little thought, she decided not to do it, as a recommendation from the Marquis could be immediately rejected by the commander-in-chief. The girl remembered that she had not left Nisa in the rain, so she could ask for a job for her help. When she came to her house, she found the commander-in-chief, who assured her that the door was open and he had not broken into someone else's house. Valentina usually did not lock the door, as she had no valuables, because it was only a temporary place of residence. Near this building was a good place to collect truffles, and when the harvest season was over, the girl was going to return to the hostel. The heroine took out some sweets and began to offer a cup of tea, and then remembered that if she did so, she would be accused of attempted murder. The commander-in-chief asked to pour that to death unpalatable tea. The heroine didn't understand the reason Nisei had come to her. It was as if she was looking at a portrait of a beautiful man sipping tea. The man never remembered what had happened that night. It was definitely not normal, for then Naze had ragged breathing and a high fever. Finishing the tea, the man asked why it tasted the way it did. Lupin explained that he added herbs that soothed the nervous system and gave a relieving effect. The commander-in-chief thought it was the tea that had helped him with his insomnia, but Luna had said it was not easy to cure with ordinary herbs. The man asked how Lupin knew so much about herbs and their healing properties. The young man said that he used to live in a mountain settlement where collecting and trading medicinal herbs were good ways to earn money. The heroine did not lie, for this story was from her first life. From that time on, in every recurring agony of her life, she drank tea and felt comforted. Valentina thought that now was the most appropriate moment to ask for a personal servant's job before the man left. Only the heroine was about to say something, when suddenly Nays asked her right here and now to make him sleep. Lupin didn't understand what the man was saying, since first the commander-in-chief had come to him unannounced, asked for tea, and now he wanted her to put him to bed. At first the girl thought Nice remembered everything, but he spoke with a face like he didn't care. This was what struck heroine, for even his sculpted face could not hide the signs of extreme fatigue. It seemed that he continued to suffer from insomnia. It had been days since Nisa had fainted. Valentina said the man could lie down on her bed, and she herself would go to the dormitory when Nice was leaving. He needed to leave the door open. The commander-in-chief stopped Lupin, saying he would stay with him. The heroine began to ask in surprise if Nisei really liked men. The commander-in-chief immediately asked the same question. Then Lupin started making excuses, saying he was joking. The heroine went to another room to rest, and if the man needed anything, he could call out to her. At night, Valentina wondered if the man's insomnia was gone or not, since she couldn't sleep at all. The more she thought about Nays, the stranger she felt. The girl decided to go and check on the man. Nays was having a nightmare. He barely slept, but he was still in a lot of pain. The heroine took a handkerchief and began to wipe the man's cold sweat. Only she wanted to go to bed, as suddenly the man grabbed Valentina's hand, not wanting her to leave. In the morning, the commander-in-chief was surprised to find Lupin sleeping in the same bed with him, holding hands. The man quietly got up and walked out the door. When the girl woke up, she didn't realize when she had managed to fall asleep and where the man had gone. Lupin walked to the door where the soldiers asked him to come through with them. The heroine didn't know who these men were, or why she felt as if she was being kidnapped. The soldiers were from the Imperial Intelligence Group. Suddenly, Valentine remembered that she might have been taken away because of the attempt on the commander-in-chief's life, for he had drunk that tea after all. The soldiers brought Lupin to the lieutenant, who was very happy to see him live. Julian said that with such a frail body, he was of no use in dangerous situations, but he was not bad in pictures. The lieutenant introduced himself, saying that he was under the direction of the commander-in-chief, so they would see each other often. Lupin did not understand the meaning of these words. Julian congratulated the young man, for from that day on he became the commander-in-chief's personal servant. The man had business to attend to, so he promised to talk later. But for now, Lupin could take a walk around the mansion. The heroine couldn't believe that she would be able to get into the commander-in-chief's house so suddenly. Seeing a piano in one of the rooms, the girl's eyes immediately lit up. Lupin started playing his favorite tune. Nice heard this and immediately went to his servant. Looking at the young man, the commander-in-chief saw Lupinia, who was enjoying the music. Lupin stood up and began to apologize that he was playing without the man's permission. Naizu began to ask what tune the young man had just played. The heroine said that most likely no one knows it, because it was composed a long time ago, and it is not the most famous melody. The man recalled the conversation with the princess, also asking what the tune was. Lupinia said it was composed a long time ago, and it wasn't the most famous tune. At the moment, Nice thought he was laughing at him. He wondered who had sent Lupinia, assuming it was the Northern Union or the Marquis Bastien. The heroine could not understand what was the matter and why the commander-in-chief smiled and why she was so scared. The man warned the young man not to touch the piano and went about his business. Nisa asked if Lupin had memorized everything Julian had said. The young man knew nothing, for the lieutenant was in a hurry and said that he had some urgent work to do and that he would tell all the details of his work later. The man asked him to remember also that he was not to be touched. The heroine thought that Nise was acting like she was harassing him. If things continued like this, she would need to perform every action with care. The commander-in-chief had said that Lupin wouldn't need to do any cleaning or laundry, since there were separate servants for that. The young man's job was to check on all the food that was brought to Naizu. The heroine began to think that if she was unlucky, she would simply die without even saying goodbye to little Zelda. But still, there might not be another opportunity. One way or another, she could keep an eye on the commander-in-chief wherever he was. Lupin's second task was to brew that nasty tea every day. The young man had said that the last time the man had told him that if he offered him that tea again, he would be charged with attempted murder. Nice thought Lupin was refusing, but he was even glad the man had asked him to do so, for if the tea became to his liking, he could make it as often as possible. In the commander-in-chief's mind, the princess was saying that it was okay to tell whatever was on your mind. The man blushed, not realizing what was going on. The heroine became quite worried about Nice, asking if he was all right. The commander-in-chief asked not to make him laugh. After all, Lupin was his personal servant, which meant his only job was to follow his orders. The heroine wanted to object, but she soon realized that it was too much, for she was really only a servant. The man said that Lupin's things would be brought soon, but in the meantime he was to bring him tea. Suddenly the young man pushed a vase of flowers and it fell to the floor and shattered. The heroine sat down on her knees and started to clean up after herself, as suddenly Nisa started touching her hair. Lupin was surprised, which made him slip and start to fall, but the man managed to pick him up in time. There was talk outside the door that Tina would be in trouble if she barged in unannounced. Seeing this picture, the girl was amazed. Nisa began to ask what brought the princess to him. Looking at Princess Lupenia, heroine immediately decided to leave there as soon as possible. Tina was dissatisfied that the maid and all the other servants of the imperial palace had been changed. The man said that the girl should know better than anyone else why it had happened. Nadim's maid confessed everything, but Tina assured him that it was all a lie, and that whatever the woman had said, she was lying. According to the maid, it all happened because of a personal grudge against Nais. The commander-in-chief went on to say that the maid's younger sister had been involved in a treason case 5 years ago, for which she was later executed. Wanting revenge for this, Nadim put poison in the man's food. That same day, during their dinner together at the imperial palace. Luckily, the maid had miscalculated the dosage, and there were no problems, but still Nisa thought that the princess knew about everything. The girl assured that she didn't even suspect it. That was why Man was forced to change all the servants in the palace in case there were any Nadim supporters left among them. Tina did not look well, so the commander-in-chief decided to escort the girl to the palace. The aristocrats left, after which Julian began to tell Lupin about his duties. The young man's room was on the first floor at the end of the corridor. The heroine woke up in the middle of the night and caught Nice in the doorway of her room. The man asked why Lupin was sleeping here. The young man told him that Julian had let him use this room, but he must have gotten it all wrong. Lupin was going to go back to the dormitory he had lived in before now. Nice asked to gather all of his belongings and then led heroine to a room that was more suited for a princess. Next to this one was the man's room. There was a door that led to Nice's chambers, and if he called for Lupin, he was to come to him immediately. In truth, the commander-in-chief just wanted to see the young man's reaction. Valentina thought that the reason the man had given her a luxurious room was because it would make it more convenient for him to make her work around the clock. Nice began to undress to take a shower, telling Lupin to make him some tea. The heroine was embarrassed, not understanding why the man would take off his clothes so often unexpectedly. The next day at the palace, all the servants were discussing Lupin. The commander-in-chief was notorious for not pitying personal servants, so it wasn't clear why he had changed his mind. After they entered the office, Nice began to change, and Lupin held out his hands for his clothes. The man didn't understand what the young man wanted to do. Lupin said that since he was a personal servant, he should have been allowed to do at least that much work, since it didn't involve touching. The young man said that not everyone in the world was interested in other people's bodies. The heroine didn't think the man knew, but subordinates had a harder time if they weren't given assignments. Nays remained silent, and the girl became calm, for she thought it wouldn't work, and he would get angry again. Suddenly, Julian came into the study, saying that the Marquis had arrived to see the princess. The headmaid informed the lieutenant that Bastien was stubbornly insisting that he was obliged to meet the girl today. All this time, they had forbidden personal meetings, but the princess might have made a mistake. The commander-in-chief said that they were going to the palace immediately. At the palace, at the meeting with the Marquis Bastien, Tina was very troubled. The man began to think that this meeting was upsetting the girl. However, they were relatives and had not seen each other for a long time. The Marquis said that the princess had grown a lot. Looking at her now, he could not help but remember that being younger, she looked very different. It's been a long time, and growing up, a child gets more serious, and people like the Marquis get older. The girl asked not to say that because the man was still full of strength. The man was flattered by these words, but as he grew older, he began to think about things he had not paid attention to when he was younger. One of these things had to do with the question of inheritance. In fact, the Marquis came in person to introduce his son Felix to the princess. The young man kissed Tina's hand, saying that he was honoured to meet her. Macris said that if the girl had difficulties, they would do anything to help her. The girl asked to accept her appreciation. Then the man decided to give her gifts. He remembered that their princess was good at music, so he decided to prepare an appropriate gift. Bastien gave a violin made by a legendary master at the height of his activity. Felix, on the other hand, decided to give sweets made by the royal family's pastry chef, Tyrant, as they had been very popular in the empire recently. The Marquis asked to prepare tea so that the princess could taste the gift. Suddenly, the maid announced that Commander-in-Chief Nez had arrived. Tina invited the man to join them, saying that Marquis Bastien had come to see them with his son. The Commander-in-Chief said that he didn't expect to see the Marquis in the palace. The man agreed with him, but Her Highness had not left the palace, so he had no choice but to visit her in person. Rumours continued to grow due to the fact that the girl was constantly staying in the palace. However, there were rumours that the girl was sick, and there were also those who declared her a fake princess. Tina became very worried as soon as the conversation started about the fake princess. Nise thought Marquis was talking about the Hot Trek article, but most people wouldn't believe such gossip. To him, rumours were like poisonous mushrooms, so they were better disposed of in time. Marquis asked the man to attend more events. Suddenly, Bastien remembered the Duchess of Quant's birthday party next month and suggested that Naiza join her. She had always been close to the imperial family, and she really liked the princess. Plus, she would love to have Lupinia play an instrument for her. The man asked if it was true that Tina had received a violin as a gift from the Marquis. The girl confirmed his speculation by saying that Bastien had been so kind as to give her a violin and sweets. Naiz began to think that the Marquis had noticed something and was now trying to trap them. The maid brought the treats, and the Marquis immediately offered to taste from the girl and Naizu. The heroine thought that she should have eaten them first. The sweets looked good, so Valentina did not think that the Marquis would risk serving poison to the princess. Felix didn't understand Lupin's behaviour, thinking that she hadn't eaten anything since morning. Only Tina was about to try the sweets, when suddenly Heroine felt sick. Everyone didn't realise what was going on. Nisa picked up the young man, shouting for someone to get the court physician. After a while, the doctor examined Lupin, saying that fortunately his life was not threatened. After assessing the patient's condition, the man could say with certainty that these were symptoms of allergies. The doctor did not know what had caused Lupin's reaction. He needed to check what ingredient had caused the boy's allergy. According to the doctor, the young man was unaware of his intolerance, but it could have been worse, because in the extreme case, he could have suffocated, and it was fortunate that he was treated quickly. The doctor wondered who Lupin was, as it was the first time he had seen him in the palace. The man was surprised when the young man turned out to be Nice's servant, but such things happened in their world too. The commander-in-chief began to ask what the doctor meant. During the examination, the man discovered that Lupin was trying to hide the fact that he was a girl. It came as a surprise to Julian that the young man really was a girl, and they had been fooled so easily. The lieutenant asked Nizza what they should do now. It was all very suspicious, so Julian wanted to send the girl to the interrogation room as soon as she woke up. The commander-in-chief ordered to forget about it, to leave everything as it was, and to silence the courtiers. The man was determined to keep her secret. Nays had something the girl needed, and he also had something to learn. Because of this, the commander-in-chief would keep Valentina close to him. This was all very strange to Julian. In the past, Nise would have ordered the man to be sent to the interrogation room at once. Suddenly, the man thought that the commander-in-chief might have feelings for Lupin. But it didn't seem to be true, because even in front of the stunning beauty, he was like a stone. The girl came to her senses, not realizing where she was. Since she was still alive, she thought that there was no poison in the cookie. The heroine decided to walk down the hallway, which was empty. Suddenly, a ceramic vase from the Eastern Empire and a statue of a mythical hero caught her interest. Suddenly, she remembered that at the end of the corridor, she had to press lightly on the painting on the left. After that, she found herself in a secret passage. The girl didn't understand how she found the secret passage so easily. Even though it was strange, she had a very familiar feeling for some reason. In memories from her past lives, she had never worked in such a large and beautiful palace. Going downstairs, Valentina found a huge, beautiful fountain. Suddenly she heard shouting as someone said that she was supposed to be helping the princess. The princess reprimanded the servant, thinking that he had brought the cookies on purpose to poison her. The man asked her to calm down because the girl was screaming too loudly. Tina called it insolence, because even now he was trying to tell her what to do. What the girl said sounded too strange for the heroine, for it seemed that the latter was a former princess. The maid said that she had tasted the cookies before, but he hadn't noticed any taste or smell of nuts. She had her suspicions, but she wasn't trying to slander the Marquis's gift without proper proof. The maid was about to pour cold water on them, so the princess wouldn't have to eat them, but luckily another servant handled it. Tina didn't think it was a normal explanation, since in the end, the maid didn't do anything right or wrong. The girl remembered that the woman had previously worked as a maid in Jasmine's palace, so she shouldn't make any more mistakes. Suddenly, the princess noticed Lupin and called him to her, asking him how he had gotten here and why he was eavesdropping on their conversation. The young man justified that when he woke up, he was in an unfamiliar room, so he went out of there and got lost. Tina didn't understand how anyone could be so stupid, or why the commander-in-chief would choose to take someone like Lupin as his personal servant. The girl took in the young man's face, saying that he had coarse hair and dull skin and was also incredibly frail. Despite all this, he had beautiful eyes, so the princess hated him for that. She had heard that Lupin used to work at the imperial palace, which made her wonder what he did before working at the palace. Lupin told her that he used to live in a small village in the north and had moved to the capital 6 months ago to work at the palace. Tina thought he was just a regular redneck and then gave him the precious bracelet in exchange for reporting certain things to her. The young man had to tell her what the commander-in-chief liked and what he didn't like, who he was seeing and what they were talking about, or even who he had spent the last night with. The princess didn't understand why Lupin didn't answer her. After all, she didn't think he would even get to touch something like that bracelet. Only Heroine wanted to refuse, as Nisei appeared behind her. The girl thought it was better to take off her bracelet for now, because if she was caught, the situation could only get more complicated. The princess said as she tried to calm down with a walk, asking how Marquis was doing. The commander-in-chief simply spoke to him and then sent him home. Though the Marquis didn't speak, but the man thought that the man found the whole situation rather uncomfortable, especially because he had been held under suspicion for some time. The princess had said that Bastian shouldn't have come uninvited. The man promised to talk about it later in private. The heroine thought that when they acted like that, they looked a lot like a very attractive couple. It had been quite a hard day for Niza, so he asked Tina to head to his chambers and rest. The girl didn't want the commander-in-chief to leave, suggesting that he stay for dinner. The man looked coldly at the princess and promised that he would visit her soon. As she left, the heroine remembered that she had forgotten to return the bracelet. In any case, the aristocrat's relationship looked rather strained, because usually noblemen married for political support, But for someone who so ardently called the princess every night, Nisa treated her rather coldly in private. The man began to ask how Lupin had gotten there. The young man began to say that he had gotten lost and decided to wander around a bit, but Nice didn't believe it. The heroine would have to go through the north gate of the palace to get there, but the gate guard didn't see anyone. The commander-in-chief didn't understand how Lupin had the nerve to think that anyone would believe the nonsense he was saying. The young man said that he didn't know, because it was the first time he had been in the princess's palace, and when he woke up, there was no one around, and so he didn't know where to go. In his heart, the man was angry that Valentina had found the secret passage that he and the princess used. Lupin said that if Nice didn't believe him, then he had nothing more to say. It was just saying a lot to Lupin that he was blessed by the Almighty God himself. For some reason, the commander-in-chief couldn't control himself being around the heroine. The man said it was ridiculous, because a god wouldn't waste his time blessing some human, unless they were talking about a bloody blessing. Nisei said that if the god had been so merciful, he would not have let people suffer this terrible plague. In the man's words, Valentina sensed the strongest hostility toward the god. The girl said that she did not believe that God was merciful either. She actually thought he was self-centered and cruel, yet there was nothing they could do about it. The more they fought him, the stronger the punishment became for them. The heroine asked if Nisei thought that weak people had the strength to stand up to a god. The girl pushed the commander-in-chief away, asking him not to use force on innocent servants anymore, because it made him look more like the god he despised. It didn't matter who he looked like, for it was Lupin who stood there mindlessly chattering away, not realizing in whose hands his life was in. Nice told the young man to go and get blood the next day, as they needed to find out what he was allergic to. The man ordered him to wait until Julian arrived to escort Lupin. After a while, the lieutenant escorted the heroine to her room. He wasn't sure if Valentina was feeling very well, but it was safe to say that she was very lucky. The man informed him that the commander-in-chief wouldn't be in tonight, so there was no need for Lupin to do anything. Now, Nice was going to be absent like this from time to time, and the servant might as well not ask where he was, because the lieutenant wasn't going to tell that. Julian didn't like the commander-in-chief keeping someone like Lupin around. He couldn't help it, so he told heroine that if she suddenly behaved suspiciously, he would personally deliver her to the dungeon. The lieutenant sent the young man to rest, and was surprised when he started upstairs, as his room was not the first floor. Lupin showed the room, saying that he too thought it was overkill, but Nice insisted that he live in the room. Heroine had her blood drawn in the morning, then said they would contact her when the results came back, but until then, she had to be wary of unusual food. It was all very strange for Valentina, because she had never had allergies before, even when she ate nuts, and she didn't understand how she knew about that secret passage yesterday. She felt like she had been living in the castle for quite some time. Suddenly, Felix was behind Valentina. The girl began to ask him if he wished to hear rumors that an imperial servant was meeting secretly with the Bastion heir. The man said that it would be all right, since no one goes there anyway. Felix began to ask about Lupin's well-being, as he remembered that during training, the girl ate everything calmly, and the allergy test showed nothing. Valentina herself had no idea, but in any case, she would find out everything when the results came back. The man wanted to ask something but changed his mind, saying that Lupin was lucky, since she had the horror of taking the place of the commander-in-chief's personal servant. He wondered how come she had to taste the food. The heroine said it was a long story, and she'd rather hear it from him instead. Valentina asked what the Marquis Bastion was even thinking, since it looked like the princess was allergic, and he was trying to kill the princess. Felix explained that nut allergies were common in the Bastion family. The current Marquis didn't have such an allergy, but his grandfather did. Princess Lupinia was the daughter of Marquis Bastion, and the past deposed empress, so it was possible that he wanted to check like this to see if it was the real princess or not. Right now, things were happening in the empire that they knew absolutely nothing about. The princess and the commander-in-chief were at the center of all these events, and they were not the only ones who knew the secret of creating the man-made vaccine. Until recently, the vaccine was made using the divine power granted to the imperial family by the god. They distributed and controlled the vaccine, so the imperial family could safely control the entire empire. But everything changed 5 years ago when the commander-in-chief of the Knights invented a man-made vaccine. The authority of the ruling family weakened, and the empire fell into the hands of Naiz. After the announcement of the creation of a man-made vaccine, the past empress was accused of divulging the secrets of the empire and was deposed. At the same time, the only blood heir, a princess, was betrothed to the commander-in-chief, who took the place of regent. The overthrow of the empress and the creation of the man-made vaccine happened almost at the same time, which suited the commander-in-chief. It was said that the curse of the Deuteronomy was God's punishment to them, arrogant mortals. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to produce a vaccine for it without using divine power and thus avoiding divine punishment. Felix thought that originally there was no man-made vaccine. The commander-in-chief, blinded by power, accused the empress and overthrew her, and then betrothed himself to a fake princess and used the divine power of the real princess to produce a vaccine and pretended as if he had created a man-made vaccine. It could have happened exactly the same way. The girl didn't believe in the fake princess, thinking that there was no need to go that far. Felix said that all this was done because of the lust for power, because Naiz could eventually become emperor. After talking to the young man, the heroine went about her business, remembering Naiz when he was in the gazebo. The girl thought that the man who locked up the real princess wouldn't have said the words he said that night. The heroine wasn't sure if Naiz was actually that cruel and insensitive a person. Valentina needed to check on the princess first. If the girl turned out to be a fake, she would have to find the real princess and find out what the secret behind the vaccine was, and to do that, Valentina needed a reason to be near the princess. Suddenly, the princess's maid told her that she was looking for Lupin. The woman led the young man to Tina's room, and then asked him to wait for a while. The girls of the palace said that the princess could not even read the notes. Everyone did not understand what happened, because Lupinia used to be so talented that she was able to play any instrument. It was rumoured that the princess had become so inept after she fell seriously ill 5 years ago, after which her sense of style changed and she started wearing all sorts of silly jewellery. When the girls asked the princess to play the violin at Duchess Gwent's birthday party, the princess was very scared. The heroine went into Tina's room, where she was very angry at the aristocrats. Tina said that since Lupin had run off with her bracelet, he should have responded to her offer. Valentina realised that this was the very way to get close to the princess. Lupin said that the princess gave him such a precious bracelet, so he accepts her offer. The girl said that the young man should report to her everything he hears about the commander-in-chief, and if he does well, she will give him more. Lupin was worried that if he started coming and seeing the princess often, the commander-in-chief might suspect something. He felt that they should come up with a suitable excuse beforehand. It sounded reasonable to Tina, and she asked if the young man had any talents. The servant said that he actually knew a little about playing musical instruments, so he could say that he was teaching the princess to play the violin. The girl considered this an insult, thinking that so low-born as he was could not teach her. The princess's maid asked to calm down. Then the heroine fell to her knees, saying she couldn't teach her anything at all. He thought of it only as an excuse to act on the girl's orders. The princess agreed, saying that Lupin would come to the palace once a week to teach her the violin. Valentina was already in her room thinking that she needed to find as much information about the princess as she could, for it was amazing how little was known about her, as if she didn't even exist in the world. All heroine had managed to find was a couple of fresh gossips. They were nothing, but she should at least read them, because sometimes gossip contained really valuable information. The princess was the only heir to the throne, but she had never shown her face in public when she was young. In the only photo of the girl taken 5 years ago, she was blurred. It was after Naiz had been appointed commander-in-chief. Suddenly, Nice walked into Valentina's office, telling her to follow him. The action moves back 5 years to the Lotus Empire. Back then, the commander-in-chief was walking through the temple, killing one by one. The old man begged the general not to do it, because nothing could be changed. People were sickened by the curse of the Deuteronomy, and were dying, and if they didn't do it, they would all die. Nise stopped over the body of Lufinia, who was bleeding. The old man said that Her Highness had done this to save countless other people's lives, and if she died because of this, they wouldn't be able to produce the vaccine. The priest asked not to worry, because after the godchild died, the next godchild would immediately appear, so that way they could deal with this disaster, and afterward they would find the next godchild. In anger, Nase killed the old man, leaving him no chance to save himself. The princess was in a coma, and it was hard to tell if she was alive or not. They needed to search the empire to find someone to take her place. The commander-in-chief couldn't let the public know what had happened. If they found out about the princess's condition, they would immediately kill her in order to find the next godchild. Currently, in the Ilonizer Manor, a man was leading heroine down the corridor. The commander-in-chief looked tired, so the girl wondered what he had been doing all night. Nisa led Valentina to the music room, though he had previously told her never to go near the piano. The man sat down and began to ask if Lupin really knew how to play the violin. The heroine was surprised that the man had found out about her arrangement with the princess so quickly. The young man was pretty well educated for someone raised in the middle of nowhere. Lupin began to say that he was just very talented, and the commander-in-chief was very lucky to have a servant like him. Nice received a message from the princess's palace. It said that the princess wanted Lupin to teach her. After the girl had fallen seriously ill a few years ago, she had stopped playing musical instruments altogether, so it was no surprise that she had lost the ability to play. Nisa thought that the princess found it rather unpleasant to take beginner lessons from a professional, as people might start gossiping about it, which was why she wished to take private lessons. The heroine realized this, as she had already heard about everything in the palace. The commander-in-chief thought that Lupin had gotten quite close to the princess, and now he needed to hear his personal servant play in person. The man had said that the young man had been honored to give Her Highness personal violin lessons, so he needed to test his skills. The heroine flirted, and Nice began to think that only recently he had seen the real princess lying in the cold basement of the temple. Valentina's face was different from the princess's, as was her hair and her hands, but she played exactly like the princess. The man wanted to find out who had sent the heroine to finish off anyone who dared to desecrate Lupinia's memory. Right now, however, Nisa felt as if the princess had returned to him once again. He decided to savor this feeling of peacefulness just for a moment. The commander-in-chief began to say that when he used to be in Sarin, he had seen the fiddler. He had only seen his back from a distance, but his hair was definitely tied up with a lilac-coloured ribbon. Looking at Lupin, Nice remembered this musician. The man warned the young man not to get too close to the princess. It would be difficult for the girl to reach the same level as she had in the past, so Lupin would just have to keep her entertained. Nisa was happy with the current state of affairs, so he warned the young man not to do anything stupid. After that, he quietly left, leaving heroine in a cold sweat. In the morning, the princess was informed that the outfit for Duchess Gwernth's birthday had arrived. The girl was not satisfied that it had long sleeves, for summer was already beginning next month. The maid assured her that Mr. Leblanche was the best tailor in the empire. Tina didn't care about the jewellery because it was too hot in this outfit. She didn't understand why she constantly needed to cover her hands in front of other people. She knew it was an imperial family tradition, but she found it too uncomfortable. It was fashionable for noble ladies to wear things that exposed more skin, so she didn't want to wear such suffocating clothes. Everyone would think that the princess was locked up and didn't even know anything about the current fashion. Tina asked the maid to change her mind, because she hadn't gone to a party in a long time, so she asked to wear whatever she wanted. The maid apologized, because the commander-in-chief had personally ordered her to give the girl this very outfit. The princess was already tired of it, as Naze kept telling her to cover herself in the presence of others, telling her not to socialize with others without permission. And now the man had placed soldiers all over the palace, so she couldn't move a single step. All Tina had to do was sit in the palace and dress up, and no one would even look at her afterwards, so she couldn't bear it anymore. The maid announced that Lupin Miller had arrived. It was too stuffy in the room, so the princess decided to go for a walk. She had heard recently that it was now popular for nobles to hire handsome servants to do all sorts of naughty things to them while hiding behind closed doors. Lupin didn't know what to say, so he said it was rather vulgar. Nobles keeping mistresses and lovers in their service was already commonplace. Tina knew how commoners had their heads, so she asked the young man to be honest and tell her the truth. She thought Lupin was trying to get into bed with the commander-in-chief to change his fate. The heroine didn't think this was something nobles usually chatted about, and she didn't understand why the princess kept mentioning that Lupin was a commoner. The young man apologized, saying that he was a man, and so instead of climbing into someone else's bed, he would rather pull someone into his own. The princess didn't appreciate such impertinence and decided to get straight to the point and have Lupin tell her how the commander-in-chief had spent the week. The young man said that Nice had spent most of his time in the palace office, working until midnight. The girl thought these were boring facts that everyone knew about, and she wanted to know something more interesting, like what kind of women he dated, or how often a week he saw them, whether he really changed partners like gloves, or if it was just a rumor. The heroine began to say that they had a misunderstanding, because during the short time that Lupin worked for the commander-in-chief, he realized that Naze is not interested in carnal pleasures at all, so he is constantly working, and almost no rest. The man was constantly trying to be seduced in this way because of his high position, but he had no intention of succumbing to the lure of such things. It was strange to the heroine that it sounded like she was protecting him. The princess thought Lupin was joking and wished her to believe it. The girl began to ask if the commander-in-chief had a place he frequented, and not something official like an office, but something more personal and private, like a hospital hotel and the like. The heroine remembered that Nice visited somewhere every day, but she said that she had no idea, because something like this had never happened before. The girl said that if Lupin noticed anything like that, he was supposed to let her know right away. The princess thought the young man should have been rewarded for his work. Tina took off her earring and threw it into the water. While the heroine was in shock, the princess pushed her into the pond as well, telling Lupin not to come back until he found her. Valentina now had to be careful, or she could be exposed. The princess didn't understand how such a low-born servant could dare to speak such nonsense to her. She was going to do worse to Lupin, but decided to take pity, since the young man was a personal servant of the commander-in-chief. She ordered him to find the earring, so he would know his place. The heroine breathed a sigh of relief, for if the princess had ordered her out of the water, she would have been in trouble. It was rather strange that the girl kept talking about status like that, so it seemed that she cared a lot about her own and other people's status in society. It was incomprehensible why an imperial princess with the highest position could have such a thought. If Felix was right and the princess was a fake, then where was the real princess? At this time, Nise was leaning over Lufinia's body, but then Luna called him over for tea. There were rumours going around the empire that the princess was only a fake, and they were mostly spread by Marquis Bastien. They would definitely try to find evidence to back up the rumours. Because of this, Nisa had absolutely no reason to remain calm right now. Luna didn't want to say anything, but Her Highness the Princess would be dead very soon, so it was time for the man to let her go. If Marquis Bastien found out the truth, he would brand the commander-in-chief a traitor. Instead, the man was better off just becoming emperor. Luna wasn't kidding, for if the empire's power came from the ability to create a vaccine, then the only suitable person to replace the princess was Nice, for he too had the godchild's blood in him. Once the high priest figured out that the vaccine was not created from God's power, but from sacrifice from the godchild, the blood never left his hands again. But Nisa had the right to take the throne of this cursed empire. The man felt that only the princess had such a right. After all, she was the one who had taken on this burden in his place, and if she had wanted to, he could have avoided this pain. But she had chosen to protect Nisa. Lupenia had always wanted the commander-in-chief to stay on her side. Nisa said that he would take care of the problem with Marquis Bastien himself, so Luna shouldn't worry. The fake princess option was something that should have been abandoned sooner rather than later anyway. The man asked, remembering that the princess had promised that she would return. All they had to do was protect Her Highness's empire, so that when she returned, they could be together. And if anyone tried to stop that from happening, they would be sorry. Luna understood that blind faith was the only thing that could explain such behavior. However, it was unclear what would happen if the girl could not return. What would happen to the empire then? After a lot of time, Valentina still managed to find the earring. If the current princess was just a fake, then a lot of things were becoming clearer. The commander-in-chief called out for the princess in his dreams every night, but once he was near her, he treated her like a stranger because he most likely loved the real princess. The heroine thought that if Nice had arranged everything, he must know where the real princess was. Remembering the lieutenant's words that the man went somewhere every day, Valentina realized that Nice had probably gone to see the real princess. Lupin sneezed as he entered the house, and Julian asked what was wrong with the young man. He had heard that the heroine had gone to the princess's palace, so he wondered why Lupin looked like that, and if the princess had pushed him into the lake. The lieutenant asked the young man to take a warm bath and go to bed, as Nice would be returning after a 2-day business trip. Late at night, the commander-in-chief returned to the manor and took a bath. Coming out of the shower room, he saw Lupin pouring tea. The young man said that he couldn't sleep first, not even waiting for Nice to return. The man didn't look well, so the heroine thought he had neglected sleep during the trip. This time, the commander-in-chief did not manage to sleep in the carriage or in the temple. He usually only managed to keep his insomnia in check around the princess. Lupin said it was likely that Nice hadn't been able to get a good night's sleep because he hadn't had a chance to drink his tea. The young man suggested that he accompany the man on his next business trip for his own good and health. Nice asked if the princess had asked him to keep a closer eye on him. The man had already warned that Lupin needed to stay away from the princess. He had heard that the young man was one of those who had offered his private lessons to the princess, and it was quite possible to imagine the real reason for those lessons. But it would be in the heroine's best interest to avoid such things. According to Nice, the princess was more aggressive than it might seem at first glance, especially when it was something concerning him. The man put his finger on Lupin's lips, saying that if they showed the princess something like that, he wouldn't stand for it. He had already approved the lessons anyway, so the young man just needed to focus on the lessons themselves and stay out of trouble. And Lupin was also now responsible for making sure the princess didn't embarrass herself at the Duchess of Gwent's party. In the morning, Tina didn't understand why Lupin had climbed to the bottom of the lake just because she said so, and if he was really going to do that, he should have tried harder, because the young man had scratched her precious Selayan ruby. The heroine didn't understand why the girl was talking nonsense that was beyond human comprehension, since she was the one who threw the stone into the lake. Valentina knew that even if she couldn't find the earring, the princess would still find something to accuse her of. Tina ordered the young man to stand still and think about what he had done wrong. After a while, the princess's maid said that Lupin was a servant hired by the commander-in-chief. The girl was unwilling to leave him alone, as he was trying to make her look worse. The princess thought Lupin was just a regular redneck who had been suspicious and anxious from the start, and he just wanted to teach him a lesson for life, so the maid needn't worry about it, and should have brought Tina's newly sewn outfits. The commander-in-chief walked past Lupin, noticing that he was about to grab sunstroke. The man walked by, and the heroine thought it was cruel, since his servant was suffering from the heat, and he just walked by and ignored it. Nice came to the princess, reminding her that the girl was not allowed to wear open-sleeved clothes. Tina made the excuse that it was hot and she had forgotten about it. The man said that if the princess didn't want to go back to where she came from, she shouldn't behave like that. The commander-in-chief had asked to wear long sleeves at all times, as she was not allowed to show her bare arms to anyone. The man was not a fan of such things, but the girl had to attend a party hosted by the Duchess of Gwent. She was one of the elders of the palace, so if they didn't attend this party, Marquis Bastian might suspect something. Tina didn't have to worry about her violin performance, because they could just say she wasn't feeling well. The man reminded her that Duchess Gwent was patronizing the princess. That was why they had to be so careful. Also, the woman remembered that the princess looked like a child, so Tina should be quiet and avoid talking. Naze said that he would be the princess's escort, so all she had to do was follow and obey him. As he left, The man added that being disrespectful to her subjects is not a behavior that a princess should show. The man didn't think it was necessary to continue today's lesson, so he was taking Lupin with him. The young man could no longer stand the heat as Nisei picked him up and carried him to a cool place. The princess got angry and broke a cup, hurting her hand. Tina thought it was even better, and now no one would ask her to play the violin at this party. The heroine woke up in the gazebo, where Nisa was wiping her forehead with a cold cloth. The man reminded her that he had already warned the young man to be careful with the princess. Lupin remembered that he had met the commander-in-chief in this very gazebo that night. The man had said that the nobles, and especially the members of the imperial family, hated it when anyone challenged their authority, and furthermore, that it was only because their authority was an empty farce. The heroine thought she was hopeless. After all, this was the second time Nice had helped her, so she couldn't believe she was being helped by someone she should be spying on. The man didn't understand why Lupin was so sad, and if it was because of what had happened before then, he shouldn't worry about it. All of this was not because Valentina had done anything wrong, but simply because the princess was taking her anger out on her. Nice asked to be submissive to the princess if the young man didn't want any more incidents like this to happen again. The commander-in-chief thought that even the way Lupin spoke was not like a servant, for he spoke too self-righteously. Nisa wasn't a blue blood himself, so he could accept the way the young man spoke, but the other nobles could pick on Lupin's every word and action. They could especially pick on his gaze, as it was as if he already knew everything he needed to know and just looked down on everyone. The heroine assured that unfortunately she couldn't do anything about it because it was part of her charm. The man started to laugh a little, and then he got embarrassed. Valentina realized that Nisei knew how to laugh after all. The action shifts to Duchess Gwent's birthday party. Kiki's assistant didn't see Princess Lupinia at the ball. Usually the main guests showed up in the middle of the party, and Duchess Gwent and Lupinia hadn't arrived yet. It was quite rare for the princess to leave the palace, so it was surprising that she decided to come to this party. The Duchess was the princess's great aunt, and Kiki had heard that she adored the princess. Gwent had been living in her domain for 10 years, until she finally moved to the capital. If she was part of the imperial family, she must have been living in private. It was already surprising that she was only coming here after a whole decade of absence. The Duchess had had a serious run-in with the deposed Empress just a decade ago, after which she had been banished. There had been many rumours as to why they didn't get along so well, but nothing had ever really been figured out. But Kiki understood why the woman had chosen to live in seclusion. Her husband passed away early, and her only son died a few years later. In any case, the reporter should have paid attention not to the Duchess of Gwent, but to Princess Lupinia, as it was very hard for them to get into the party to get exclusive material. Suddenly, the butler announced the arrival of Commander-in-Chief Nisa and Princess Lupinia. Tina said that Lupin was her guest today, so he didn't need to do anything stupid and move far away from her. The heroine didn't understand why the girl had taken her along, since she had injured her arm and could no longer play the violin. Marquis Bastien approached the princess with Felix, and the young man began showering compliments on the girl. When the Marquis asked Lupinia to come to him so that everyone could greet the princess, Tina looked nervously at Nisa. The man apologised, saying that Her Highness wasn't feeling well, and she would just like to meet with the Duchess, after which she would head back to the palace. The heroine could see that Naze didn't like the way the situation was playing out. The butler announced the arrival of the Duchess of Gwent, and an elderly woman appeared before the aristocrats. The Marquis greeted his aunt, saying that it had been quite some time since their last meeting, but she was as beautiful as she had been in her youth. The woman said that the Marquis was always better than his brother in terms of manners, even in his youth, and he was also always extremely ambitious. The princess approached Gwent and wished her a happy birthday, but the latter threw the girl's hand away, anxiously thanking her for the congratulations. After a while, Lupin asked Kiki how she got the invitations, but the woman simply said that she had plenty of contacts. It seemed to the heroine that the atmosphere had somehow strangely changed when the woman met her great niece, whom she had loved in the past. The reporter said that it had been a long time, and she probably wouldn't have been able to recognize Lupinia if they had met by chance. Lupin said that although it didn't look like it, he favoured social ladders more. In return for information about the princess, Heroine offered to give Kiki information about Felix Bastian and the Knights Commander-in-Chief. The reporter began to recall that a year ago, in one of Odin's alleys, she had come across a girl being molested by some drunken man. He called the girl Tina, saying she was his runaway daughter, and her face was exactly like Princess Lupienia's. Kiki was sure that something more was hidden there, even if it had been a stupid accident. Because of this, the next day she went in search of the man, but the same day, the man suddenly disappeared. Lupin was approached by the princess, asking why he still hadn't brought the violin, just standing there talking non-stop. The heroine followed the girl, saying that the princess had hurt her arm, and she didn't think the girl would be able to practice today. Tina briefly said that she already had someone who would play the violin herself. In the room, the Marquis asked the woman if she liked his gift. The Duchess said that if she made a necklace of that pearl, her old neck would break in two. Felix offered the princess a taste of pie, then the woman asked them to leave her alone, for she was very bored with her. Felix suggested that the princess have her first dance of the evening. Nacy recalled that the princess had said she wasn't feeling well tonight. The Marquis told the Duchess that he'd asked Lupinia to play the violin for her, but unfortunately, she wasn't feeling well. Tina told the woman that she had injured her hand, so she wouldn't be able to play for her today, but she brought someone who would perform in her place. Although he's not a professional violinist, he's the one Commander Nisa appointed as her teacher, so his skill is far from average. Nais didn't understand why the princess had suddenly decided to go for such a thing. The princess reminded Lupin that he was going to give her a lesson and asked him to come up to her and show her his talent. The aristocracy didn't think someone from the countryside could be any good. Tina wanted to see how embarrassed the young man would be in a place like this, and whether he would continue to act as arrogant. The heroine picked up her violin and played, thinking that the Lord also liked her performances very much, and that was the reason he was so obsessed with her. Everyone was surprised at the melodiousness of Lupin's music. But suddenly, a string broke on his violin. The heroine was not embarrassed by such an event and continued playing on 3 strings. The woman immediately remembered the times when Lupinia used to play for her. Then the girl decided to take on the role of God's child. The Duchess tried to dissuade her, but she, as a princess of the empire, decided to bear the burden. From nostalgia, the woman's tears flowed, and all the aristocracy began to praise Lupin. The angry princess approached the young man and helped him to fall. Everyone was in complete shock, but the Duchess approached Heroine, asking if Her Highness was hurt. The woman said that the one was all dirty, and she should go with her great aunt. The aristocracy did not understand why the Duchess called this servant Your Highness. The woman took her to her room, saying that Valentina, as a person of royal blood, should look respectable. She asked Lupin what this new fashion with cross-dressing was. Nevertheless, the heroine still had to wear a suitable dress to the party. The Duchess found a beautiful dress and began to remove Valentina's clothes. The woman apologized, saying that she shouldn't have left the princess in Odin then, and all this time she must have been in a lot of pain. She didn't understand why Lupinia hadn't said she was a child of God. The princess knew what would happen to her, and if people found out she was really God's child, even if they needed the vaccine so badly, they wouldn't do anything to her. The woman said that getting engaged to the commander wasn't the princess's idea either, and she just wanted that commander to watch her like a hawk. The Duchess believed there was no need for the princess to force herself to marry someone like that. She had come all the way to Odin to tell Lupinia this, that Marquis Bastian would help her. Suddenly, Nice walked into the room with Tina, and that's when the heroine realized she was caught. The princess was shocked that the arrogant servant turned out to be a girl. The Duchess began accusing Tina of tripping Valentina, telling her to get out now. The girl left, and the woman handed Lupin some clothes that she should hurry up and put on. The commander-in-chief said with a cold face that he would be back and waiting for heroine at the party. Valentina couldn't believe that Nice knew she was a woman. She had been humiliated by the princess, but something had come out of it, and if what the Duchess said was to be believed, it was turning out to be an interesting situation. The vaccine was not made using the divine power of the imperial family, but using the power of a godchild. And that godchild was Princess Lupinia. And to make this vaccine, the princess had to go through something so horrible, the Duchess felt guilty. It didn't seem normal, so the heroine couldn't say for sure, but she wondered why the woman kept calling her Your Highness. Valentina stepped out into the hall, and everyone immediately recognized her as the maid who played the violin. Everyone could not believe that the man rumored to be God's child was a woman. The Marquis asked where his aunt had gone and where the princess was, for she had followed them. Since the two important guests had left, the party atmosphere had become rather dull. Lupin didn't understand why Nice was looking at her like that, since he knew she was a woman. The Duchess asked what the man was staring at, and if he thought he should ask his bride to dance, since it was a party. The Commander-in-Chief immediately suggested that heroine go to the dance. Marquis asked his aunt who the woman was and why the commander was dancing with her. Bastien didn't understand why Nice was dancing the first dance with someone other than the princess. There were rumours that he was a ladies' man, but the princess didn't think he would flaunt his behaviour. The aristocracy thought the rumours that the princess and the commander were having problems matched reality. Nice was forcing his fiancée to watch him dance with his mistress. The heroine was sure that the man knew that the princess was God's child. The girl thought that Nice had put a fake princess in Lupinia's place, and then he had imprisoned the real princess, using her, and then made everyone think that he had created the vaccine artificially. Valentina saw that Nice wasn't surprised, and so she asked how long ago he had known she was a woman. When the man said he knew more than she thought he did, the girl asked if she would be removed from her position. Nice said he would not, for if he had wanted to, he would have sent her away at once when he learned of her sex. There was only one thing the man demanded, and all Valentina had to focus on was making tea. The heroine noticed that Nice didn't look like himself, as he was too happy right now. Lupin didn't think the Duchess was doing well, and it looked like her dementia had progressed quite a bit. She kept mistaking heroine for a princess, but she didn't even look like one. Nice said it was true, and they didn't look alike at all. However, Lupin somehow also reminded the Commander-in-Chief of a princess. Seeing the strange look in the man's eyes, Valentina was embarrassed and ran away. Left alone, she didn't understand why she couldn't stop her heart from beating next to Nice. The Commander-in-Chief approached Lupin, telling her not to run away from him. He was saying that there was something he couldn't let happen, after which he hugged the heroine and kissed her. The princess peeked at this and wondered how this happened, as she had always had a soft spot for Nice. Valentina didn't know why the man was looking at her with such a hard stare, which was not there before. Suddenly Felix came up to Tina, asking what was wrong, as the girl looked rather pale. Tina assured him that she was fine. She was just not used to crowded places, and the hall was stuffy. Felix thought that was unfortunate, because he was looking forward to dancing with the princess, but he was sorry to hear that it wouldn't work out. He pretended to be surprised that the commander's servant turned out to be a woman. Felix said he didn't know what Nice was thinking, keeping this servant disguised as a man with him. The young man didn't think the man was the kind of person who found love interests everywhere. Tina excused Nisa, saying that he wasn't the kind of person to behave like that. She would like to say that it was just like the rumours, but one day, the girl thought it would be even better if the commander had a new girl every day of the week. The princess would rather have Casanova than someone incapable of feeling emotions. The girl started to fall, but Felix managed to pick her up, saying that he felt sorry for her, because her feelings for the commander were sincere. But it could not go on like this. The young man said that Tina shouldn't trust the commander, as he might betray her at some point and try to take the throne as emperor. And if she didn't want that, she should become empress herself first. Then the girl will take all of her power and force Nisa to kneel before her. Felix added that House Bastien would be on her side, and he would be with her until she took her rightful place as empress on the throne. Suddenly, the commander approached them, saying that it was time for the princess to go home. Tina turned the man down, saying that she was going back to the party with Felix. The couple left, leaving the commander-in-chief shocked by this behaviour. At the party, Everyone was amazed that the princess started dancing with the heir to the house of Bastian. The commander had brought his mistress with him, and now the princess was making a scene. The aristocrats were sure that by tomorrow morning, a whole new scandal would engulf the empire. The heroine did not understand where Naze had gone, leaving the princess alone. The Duchess began to fall asleep, and Lupin decided to take her to her room. Suddenly, the woman woke up, telling the girl not to go to the underground temple in the imperial sanctuary of Rojas anymore. The reason the Duchess took the princess there that day was to make her believe that she needed to know the truth about the heir to the throne. The woman never thought that the princess would turn out to be a godchild, but now she believed that the girl didn't need to donate her blood anymore because there was an artificial vaccine. The Empress had always been focused on her son and had cornered her daughter without blinking an eye. Her Highness breathed a sigh of relief when she learned that it was Lupinia who was going to be sacrificed. She didn't want to give the throne to the girl because Bastian's blood flowed in her veins. The princess was the one who sacrificed the most for this empire, so she should take the throne. Lying in bed with Tina, Felix recalled their recent conversation where he had asked the girl to break her engagement to the commander and become betrothed to him. The Bastian family had promised that they would see to it that she took her place as empress. The princess saw that the man wished to enter into a matrimonial union, whereupon she began to inquire about the terms of their contract. Felix desired instructions on how to make an artificial vaccine. The girl said that it would be difficult because the commander did not reveal it to her. The man assured her that they didn't need all the details, and a small amount of information would be enough for them. Tina didn't understand why Felix needed the instructions for the vaccine, while the man said it was the source of the commander's influence and power. If the girl could find out about the vaccine, she would have the power to control Nisa as much as she wished. The princess didn't take her word for it, telling the man to prove his intentions with actions. Felix kissed the girl, and then they headed for the room. As expected, this girl didn't have a mark, and she wasn't Lupinia, Felix's sister. The commander-in-chief had to sort things out faster than he expected. In the beginning, he did what he had to do to send a warning to Tina. If he let Lupia go, it would seem to him that he would lose her forever, so he had unwittingly crossed the line. Nice didn't understand why the princess was still lying in that cold, underground temple. The man had to go there to see the princess. Heroine walked into the room, saying that she would escort the man wherever he went. She got the feeling that after the party, Nisa was treating her even colder. The commander-in-chief ordered her not to follow him, adding that he would not be returning today. Valentina followed the man, though. The Duchess had mentioned the underground temple of Rojas. Since it was the place where the commander had gone alone, the princess could be there. The girl jumped out of the bushes and knocked out the guards with lightning-quick movements. When she opened the door, the heroine was surprised, because she didn't expect a place like this to be clean, since no one had used it for a long time. It was strange that this place seemed very familiar to Heroine, and she was sure that there was something there. Valentina started to go down into the basement, but suddenly the door closed behind her, and a poisonous gas came out of the ventilation, even more powerful than what they had used in training. It was all a trap to stop the spies. Immediately she realized why they were trained on poisons. The heroine began to experience the feeling she had when she remembered a past life and finally had memories of her 8th life. Duchess led Lupinia to a place where the children of God had been imprisoned for generations. 300 years ago, the Lord had inflicted punishment on their people, starting with the era DEI pandemic. The pandemic swept through their lands every few decades, but the empire was able to create a vaccine called the Lord's Blessing. This was done by taking the lives of young people who were children of God, where their blood was used. The children of God were found in the north of the empire, near the northern city, and they were brought to the palace. In the basement of the palace they were shackled forever. The children of God died quickly from abuse and excessive bloodletting. The last of them died during the 9th IRA DEI pandemic after excessive blood loss. Since then, the aristocracy has never been able to find the next child. There was a record of God's first child who was 300 years old, and her name was Leanne. The heroine realized that the Lord loved her, so he placed a blessing on her. He made sure that no poison could get into her blood. If the start of the vaccine was because Valentina had saved Lian 300 years ago with her blood, then the Lord was truly cruel. The girl realized that it was not only her who was reborn, but also the child she had saved 300 years ago. The heroine thought Lian was in more pain than she had ever been in. Lupania became a child of God because she knew everything all along. Valentina's 8th life was Lupania's. Suddenly, the princess's body rose up, yet it had no emotion. Once Lupania said that there was no need to find any more godchild because she was one. The girl thought that preventing the aristocracy from finding any more victims was an easy task, because she could just be a godchild. Everything went as the heroine expected, and her mother, the empress, was happy. After that day, she moved into the underground temple of the imperial sanctuary of Rojas, and there were guards there in case she decided to escape. Luna told the high priest that they should not proceed any further, for Lupania had passed out last time, and there was no place on her arm to prick. The man assured that it was Her Majesty's order, and if they didn't collect the required amount for the vaccine, they seemed on the cutting board. Each time donating blood to the limit, the heroine felt almost joyous from her need to get revenge on the Lord. This time, the girl believed that the Lord would not be able to harm this child the way he wanted to. Lupania woke up saying that here they were finally meeting. The princess said that their souls split when she fell, and that could also be what the Lord wanted. Since then, the girl had been in the temple the whole time, waiting for Valentina. The princess was doing this to complete her life, and the heroine knew it as well as she did. The punishment the Lord had assigned them meant that they had to bear the burden of 9 human lives. Lupania had said that Valentina would now become her 9th life and her final punishment. Through her tears, Lupania saw Nisa, not stopping to say that she had done everything she could, and from now on the heroine would have to continue living this life and take care of the commander-in-chief, for he was that child. The man shoved Valentina aside, and picking up Lupania asked her to open her eyes. If, at some point, he could see her again, he would want to beg her forgiveness for making the Lord hate her and for never understanding the girl's pain. Then Nise did meet her, and Lupania was a guard sent by her mother to watch over him. The heroine realized that Ail Naze was Lian, whom she had once rescued. In a fit of emotion, the man lashed out at Lupin, asking what she had done to the princess. The commander-in-chief said that he would not forgive this, and he was about to kill the girl, but she asked him not to, saying that she was Lupania. The heroine realized that if her last life ended at the hands of Naze, her punishment would end, but not his. The man could be left alone, unable to end this terrible curse, for this vicious cycle could continue. Now that Nice thought about it, he began to wonder if this was how Lupin pulled his tricks. He understood why the Earl Grey's daughter had fallen for her, for with such a naive expression on her face, the girl had lied so carelessly through her teeth. Niall revealed that he knew the heroine was a spy from Sarin. He was curious how she would react when she realized she had been exposed, but the ridiculous excuse that she was a princess was quite ingenious. The girl wanted to speak up, but the man ordered her to shut up and not talk to him as if she were a princess. Nisa began to think that he should have killed Valentina earlier, but suddenly Julian asked the commander to stop. The lieutenant said that Lupinia's body was lying on the cold ground. Then the man walked over to her body and ordered him to pick up Lupinia and take her to the interrogation room. At the estate of the Marquis of Bastion, Felix came to Hans Breiger, who was in their dungeon. He took the man to the dining room and showed him a picture of the princess, where he told him that it was definitely his daughter Tina. He did not understand how the girl could pretend to be a princess for so long. Tina lived like this, while her poor father was left to fend for himself. The man began to ask if Felix wanted him to confirm that the princess was a fake. The young man said that obviously they would give him a decent amount of money, since he had done them a great favour. After this conversation, Felix reported to his father what had happened. It was confirmed that the woman pretending to be the princess was Tina Braga. The Marquis couldn't believe how brave Ailnaz was, that he replaced the princess with a fake. This was their chance, since they could still cut off the commander-in-chief's head for treason. Tina was afraid that the commander would abandon and forget her, so Felix had planted her livelihood, and he thought she would try her best to cling to it. The Marquis praised the work, saying that all they had to worry about now was the vaccine, because they had to get it to be able to take the throne. The artificial vaccine was a fake, and there was no way that such a thing would be possible. The Marquis realized that they must have used the real Lupania in some way, and she was the only one who could make a vaccine like the child of God. The man promised to decide whether to accept Felix as heir after he found Lupania. The young man began to remember how the Marquis had killed the man in the store while he was still a boy sitting in the closet. Suddenly, an unknown man brought the boy in, saying he was hanging around idly outside the door. Bastien removed the pendant with the House of Lorraine's coat of arms from him and then killed him. Felix in his thoughts asked to wait for the Marquis Bastien for the moment when he would stand before the imperial throne and he would kill him. Nice stood at Lupinia's grave, paying no attention to the pouring rain. The soldier told Kiki that he had not seen Lupin for several days, and it came as a surprise to him that the servant was a woman. The reporter insisted on remembering everything in detail, for she was curious about what had happened between the girl and Neise. Seeing the devastated commander-in-chief, Kiki didn't understand where he could have been walking in such heavy rain. It became more important to her that Neise was dressed in mourning attire. The reporter didn't see anyone mentioned in the obituaries, so she could only guess. Later, the man went to the dungeon, asking if the soldiers had gotten a confession. The soldier apologized, saying that the only thing they had heard in the last 3 days was a request to meet with Nice. In the interrogation room, the lieutenant argued that Lupin was only making life harder for himself. They already knew that they had been sent to them by Earl Grey, so she should have confessed everything, whether he had ordered the murder of the princess and how much the Earl knew about Her Highness. The Imperials found no record of the girl even in Saran, so the man asked if her name was really Lupin. The heroine's real name was Valentina. One day she met Leon, saying that he was beautiful enough to charm her Valentina, so she would send him a proper blessing, and he would not fall ill of any disease, and his blood would be blessed with divine powers that could cure diseases. The voice said that whether or not this would actually be a blessing, Leon would understand throughout her life. Lufenia had once asked Nisa if they should just run away, if they could forget about the vaccine and her responsibility as a princess, and just run away together. The woman screamed that the commander-in-chief was a traitor and should be arrested as a traitor for endangering the entire empire. Lupenia ran out to the man, thinking that she could not lose him again. The Empress had said that she could take Nisa's life any time she wished. The girl had to think hard before she acted. In the next flashback, the princess had too much blood taken, and she did not regain consciousness, and her heart stopped. Afterward, the heroine woke up in Lupin's body, near the twins. Presently, Valentina, through tears, asked to call for Nisa, after which she promised to tell him everything. The man stepped in, saying that he would personally listen to the princess's killer, so Julian needed to leave them alone for a while. The commander-in-chief asked to continue, because telling him everything from beginning to end without a single lie could serve the girl better. The heroine began to ask whether the man was eating well and whether he was still suffering from insomnia. There were herbs in her bedroom drawer, and Nise should have made tea. Suddenly emotional, the man lashed out at Valentina, asking what she was trying to accomplish. The commander recognized that the girl had been very persuasive before. Even though he had his suspicions about her, the man was awed by her violet eyes. Her violin performance, her lips, and her pathetic attempts to make him think of the princess annoyed him. He had been foolish to want this to go on for any longer. When the time came and the heroine's identity was revealed, Nice was still trying to find excuses to keep her by his side. The man couldn't understand why Valentina had killed an innocent man. He wanted to hear why he should keep the girl alive. The heroine abruptly pounced on Nais and started kissing him. Suddenly, the commander-in-chief smelled the same scent from the girl that the princess had. The man lashed out, asking why this was the way she was trying to placate him. Nisa told the girl not to overestimate her importance, because she just reminded him of a princess for a while, and that's all he was interested in her. The heroine said that a man couldn't kill her anyway because she was God's child. Valentina knew that Princess Lupenia was just as much a god child, and she knew that they had used her blood to create a vaccine, and now that the princess was Metva, she was the only godchild, and there had never been an artificial vaccine. If they wanted to produce vaccines in the future, Nisa would need to handle her with care. The man ordered silence, for they couldn't trust a spy. Then the girl grabbed a pen and cut her hand. If Nays needed blood, she had plenty of it. They could get some holy water and mix it with that. Now they could see if she was telling the truth. The man thought the heroine had lost her mind, but the woman said she would no longer let Nisei carry this burden alone. The girl promised to bring everything back to the way it used to be. The commander-in-chief remembered telling the princess that her scent was beautiful. Lupania didn't know that Nice was the type of person who noticed another person's scent. The man understood what the girl meant. He had never really noticed it with anyone else but her. However, he liked the smell of the princess, as well as the tea she drank every day. Nays said it was only after he met the girl, and then he experienced that feeling of being able to enjoy something. Lupania asked if the commander had slept last night, and how many days it had been. It was normal for Nidza. It seemed to the girl that he had nightmares whenever he tried to sleep. The man in the dream was a very frightening person, and he couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Then he'd been stabbed with something sharp. Nisa thought that maybe he had committed a sin in his past life, but it was all right now, because he was near the princess, and he had no more nightmares, and he felt as good as he had ever felt before. Currently, Luna argued that it was impossible, because there had never been a case of several God's children appearing at the same time. Julian was so shocked by these words that he almost fainted. The priest thought that since the girl was a spy from Sarin, she could lie to survive. Luna added the heroine's blood to the holy water, and it began to glow. And that's when they realized that Valentina was indeed God's child. The heroine woke up, and Nice began to wonder why the girl only remembered everything now. He remembered what had happened between them, and now he could tell that Valentina's eyes had gotten even deeper, while Lupania had been unconscious, her soul separated from her body. The man said that they had verified that Lupin was a child of God, but she shouldn't be too relaxed, because even if she was still a spy and suspected of killing the princess. The relationship between the godchild and the vaccine was a secret even within the Empire, so Nice couldn't understand how the spy from Sarin had learned this information. Valentina said that the Count had told her nothing, and all he wanted was information about the vaccine. The heroine had no idea how much Earl Grey knew, but she was sure he didn't know who she was. The girl assumed that since Nice kept mentioning Sarin, he still didn't believe her. The man thought that the girl would feel better after resting, but she kept raving about being a princess. Nise began to ask what was wrong with Valentina's wrist, for they had given her painkillers, but the pain was supposed to persist for some time. The man ordered heroine to never hurt herself again. The girl felt bad for getting ahead of herself, so Nays shouldn't have to worry about her. The commander-in-chief didn't understand why the girl was acting like she was worth something again, since all she had to do was follow the man's orders. The girl stood up and asked to hear her out, saying that Nisei was a child of God. The artificial vaccine that was now being produced was made from a man's blood, so the heroine wanted him to stop it immediately. If he needed blood, she could give her own. Nice stood shocked, not realizing what the girl had just said. They had once told a man that Lupinia's heart was still beating, but it was unknown when it would stop. They could only pray that God would bless Her Highness. Nice was furious, for if God was such a benevolent being, he would not have done this to the girl. Being a child of God was a curse in itself, and being able to make a vaccine from human blood was a punishment. Such a God could not bestow blessings upon them, so the man did not understand why they should sacrifice anything for such a hypocrite. Nisei said that if only he had been a child of God instead of a princess. Suddenly the man's blood got into the holy water, and he knew he had been blessed. Once Nays knew the truth, he wanted to ask Lupinia when she woke up if she knew he was God's child. Valentina said that they didn't need the commander-in-chief's blood anymore, so he didn't have to waste any more drops. The girl assured him that it was all her fault, so they would work it out so that Nice wouldn't be hurt anymore. It was only then that Nisei thought that the heroine might have turned out to be a princess.